Welcome to another edition of the Dateline Downtown podcast. This is your host, Juan Hernandez. Today we have a very special guest on our show. I want to welcome Heli Martinez to the podcast. Heli, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. Glad to be here.
And I always forget to mention this to people when we're recording, just kind of speak into the mic.
Okay.
Not so close, but kind of like direct
Make sure
into
that
it.
it's going in.
Because these mics are very sensitive.
Yeah.
And they're not sure mics, but
Right.
they're something.
Okay.
But kind of want to talk to you today. I mean, you've pretty much known me all my life.
Right.
I'm 23 years old.
Correct.
I'm sure you're much older than I am.
Yeah.
But you've known me ever since, and you know my dad for
Right.
as
Right.
far back as
Right.
he can remember. And this is actually the first time we're actually sitting down and having an actual conversation.
Correct.
Because, I
Correct.
mean, every time I go visit you in Baytown, it's either, hey, how you doing? And this
It's
and that.
mom and it's the family,
And that's it.
Yeah.
Kind of see how everybody's doing.
Right.
But it's really cool that we have the chance now to actually sit down and talk.
Yeah.
And,
This is great. This is great because we needed to do this.
Oh yeah, and primarily I want to talk to you about. I've always been curious about your career. 'Cause
Okay.
I only hear the stories from my dad.
Okay.
You know. Oh yeah, I remember when I used to go see Heli play at all the clubs.
Yeah.
And all around Houston and stuff. And
Yeah.
we used to go to concerts together.
Correct.
You know. I mean, like every time my dad would come over, he would just spend it at your house.
Right.
He would just come on over.
Right. Right.
But just kind of give the listeners out there a brief background of who you are and
Okay.
where you come from.
Okay, I was born in Baytown, Texas, and
Mm-hmm.
but when I was a kid, I spent a couple of years, 3 years in Mexico in a town called Querétaro,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew nothing about music back then, but I was getting to be about like 12, 13 years old, and I wanted to learn how to play the piano. I really got kind of interested in the piano, and there was a teacher there who she was so busy with the conservatory there in Querétaro that she said, listen, well, I can show you how to play the piano here and there. I've got a brother who plays guitar. And I just happened to say, okay. I wasn't really interested in the guitar. But what's funny is I ended up playing the guitar. But I ended up really loving the guitar. And when I got into it, I started learning. My teacher had a funny way of showing me how to play. He had a family, and he would come into this little room and leave me in there, and he would show me like 3 chords.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, I wasn't really that interested, but I wanted to just kind of be respectful and say. So he would show me 3 chords, 4 chords, and then he'd leave the room.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd leave me there by myself, and I'd go, well, I can't leave and be disrespectful. And so I'd learn how to play these chords.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd leave me in there long enough where I learned to play them real well. Then he'd come in later on and do the same thing, another 3 chords, day after day.
Mm-hmm.
Before you know it, I was learning them pretty fast. And then I really started getting into the music. The Beatles, and those days, it was the British invasion coming in,
Right.
which was the Dave Clark Five, the Beatles, the Stones, those kinds of guys, the Animals, those kinds of guys.
Oh, Eric Burden.
Eric Burden and the Animals,
amazing.
you know, all those guys. And then you had your American bands too. The Beach Boys were just starting out, but I was still at the age where I was catching some of the older guys like Elvis Presley and some of those guys, the tail end of that. The British invasion was coming in. I was really getting into that, you know,
Okay.
and harmony. And luckily, I was able to hear the rough side of it, which was the Stones, and then the pretty side, which was the Beatles. So you had the harmony with the Beatles, and then the rough bluesy side of the Stones. So I got both sides of it, which was great. You know, the rough part, but also the Beatles part that had harmony. So I learned harmony. You know, the third harmony, the fifth harmony, and how you put harmonies together. And the chords and all of that, and I really stressed a lot on practicing. Practicing was paramount. It's just, that's the difference between somebody who says they can play guitar or not, is how much practice time you put into it.
Right.
You know, you don't necessarily have to be incredibly talented, but the amount of time you put into it will show up, you know.
Before we keep jumping into the whole British invasion,
Okay.
how much time did you spend on actually playing the piano, like learning it, before you picked up the guitar?
Hardly any at all. Hardly any at all. I mean, I almost started playing the guitar right away because she couldn't really be there to give me the lessons, although she wanted to. She was really busy in the conservatory of the town we were living in.
This was in, for people who don't know, this is in Mexico.
This is in Mexico, in Querétaro, which
Mexico.
is the city was the state of Querétaro and the city of Querétaro, which is almost at the center of Mexico itself, like just a couple hours from Mexico City.
Okay.
So it was the old country. I mean, the street in front of where I lived, the street was cobblestone street, you know.
Wow.
And they delivered milk not in a carton but in a bucket, you know. And so and we didn't have a refrigerator. We didn't have anything like that. Everything had to be fresh and brought in from the market every day.
Wow.
You
You
know?
go from milk and eggs and
Exactly.
stuff
All
like
of that had to be 3 eggs, 5 eggs. You know, it wasn't a carton. There was no grocery store at the time. There wasn't anything like a grocery store or anything like that. So it was all market, like the old days, you know.
It's kind of interesting to see how people of a younger generation now, I guess, take a lot of that for granted. You know, we do have we've come a long way since then.
Oh, we've come a long way.
A long way, and you can attest to that.
Yes, and how hard things, and like what you're saying about taking it for granted, one of the things is how much easier it is nowadays for children to concentrate on the things they really want to concentrate on, which they should not take that for granted. Because back then, like I say, when I got up to go to school, I would see my schoolmates carrying buckets of milk from before they went to school. They'd have to be carrying, like mules, carrying buckets of milk to and from. They'd have started at 5 o'clock in the morning before they went to school.
Wow.
Carrying this stuff from one block to another just to make a little bit of extra money. That's how poor people were. So to get into something like music was a luxury, you know. So you really had to want it. And that was one of the things that I really appreciated was I wanted it. I had grown up in the States and saw how much easier it was here as opposed to there. So I really appreciated it and practiced a lot. Made the difference throughout the years. As far as me getting gigs with bands, I would get gigs where other players would, as a guitar player, would get gigs where other players, and auditions. I would pass the auditions. I may have an audition with 3 or 4 other guitar players auditioning for the same part, same guitar spot in the band, and I would get it every time. Pretty much, I never did not get it because I had practiced and continued to practice and took it real serious, you know. But I really loved it. So I loved what I did, you know, and that's a big thing. Is you have to love what you're doing.
Right. There's nothing worse going into, let's say, a job or school where you just don't like it. And
right. Your
like,
heart is not completely into it. You
Right.
kind of know you have to do it, but you really don't. You might have to, but if you have a plan, you could work your way to the thing. That if you really plan and you apply yourself, stay away from the things that harm that
right.
stuff, you know.
And I hear this from musicians a lot, saying if you're getting into music to get famous or rich, then you might as well just choose something else, because
Yes.
like you're saying, if your heart's not in it, then you got to pick something else, because it's not gonna, unfortunately, it doesn't work out
No, it doesn't. I mean,
to your favor.
Look at the percentage, you know. Probably 1 out of every 1,000 gets famous, maybe. So what's the deciding factor? Love what you do.
Right.
If it's an instrument, or if it's whatever it is, love what you do, because that's why you're doing it. And down the road, there were times in my life where I had to reevaluate. You know, I started when I was like 13 playing the guitar, and there were times when I was 25 or 35 or 45 when I had to reevaluate, why am I doing this? And times get hard financially, and I'd have to rethink, and it would always come back to, why did you start doing this? Because I loved it. So that pulls you through the hard times, and so that's a really important factor. Is love what you do,
Right.
love what you do.
Right. And going off what we were talking about earlier, the British Invasion, you have bands like The Who,
Correct.
the Yardbirds, Cream,
Cream,
guitarists like Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck,
Jimmy Page, Eric
Jimmy
Clapton.
How was that for you growing up in that scene, looking at the scene from your perspective, seeing guitar players like Hendrix and Beck? I mean,
Clapton.
when was like one of the first concerts you started going to, or
Well,
guitarists that you emulated growing up?
Well, the very first concert I went to was at the Coliseum in Houston. That's the place you would go see concerts, and you would have bands from England and from different parts of the U.S.
The Sam Houston Coliseum, right?
Sam Houston
Okay.
Coliseum, yes.
Right.
And that's the first concert I went to, and the way I got to go was, I think I had come back from Mexico. I was like 15 years old, and there was three bands. There was a band opening up called the Blues Magoos, and they had a hit song out called "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet," which had a cool guitar riff in it, and the band that was headlining. So that was the band that opened up, the Blues Magoos.
Right.
But the headlining band was what was the singer from England? It was a pop band. It was what was it? Not Cream, but the middle band was The Who, and nobody had ever heard of The Who. It was their first tour.
Wow.
That was when they were destroying all their equipment on stage.
What year was this?
This would have been 1968, something like that.
Wow.
68, 66, something like that. And Herman's Hermits was the headlining band, and they were so kind of corny. I don't mean to say corny, but they were kind of corny in comparison to The Who.
Did the Who blow them off?
They blew them off, totally off the stage. But they came on. They were the middle band. The Who was, and at the end of their set, they destroyed all their equipment. They did the song that they were famous for. That they destroyed all their gear. I forget the name of the song, but they destroyed all their gear. And that's when Keith Moon, the drummer,
right,
before he OD'd. So this was their first tour. And they were destroying, at those times, that's when rock groups were destroying their hotel rooms and stuff like that.
Throwing TVs out.
Throwing TVs out, driving limousines into the swimming pools, that kind of stuff, which was crazy back then,
And they would get banned from hotels. Hotels would be like, hey, don't let these people check in.
No, be careful. These guys are coming into town. Don't get them. But if they didn't hear about it, they would be sorry about it.
And you see a band like The Who now, who they could just headline shows, and
yes,
they could just do one or two shows and they're good.
Yes, Pete Townsend was the main writer for that. And he continued to write. And even after Keith Moon was gone, had died. Pete Townsend continued to write some of the most famous Who things, which was incredible stuff. And they also did the big outdoor concerts like Woodstock, which was had all the big bands like the Animals, like that, Who, all those people, Hendrix, all those people like that.
I've only seen footage of Woodstock every now and then on YouTube. Performances from Jimi Hendrix, Carlos Santana,
yes,
one of my many favorite guitarists out there. People like, who else was there?
There was.
I heard a lot of other bands got invited, but some turned.
Yeah, some turned it down.
Like the Doors, and I forget other bands, but
there was a lot of bands. I think it was like a 3-day event, and there was just thousands and thousands of people camped out there, and that was at the height of the hippie movement time, and everybody was doing LSD, and there was pot smoke in the air and all that stuff. So it was about to kind of end almost,
Hmm.
which was a good thing, Bec-
I mean, and if you look at it from decade by decade, it's each decade has its own, I guess, its own. Like you say, oh yeah, I remember the '60s or the '70s or the '80s. You remember what that was like.
yes, you do, and you kind of remember what bands were doing that
Hmm.
decade.
Right, right. And jumping off into the 1970s,
Okay.
you had, obviously you still had bands like Zeppelin getting bigger,
Yes.
Deep Purple.
Deep Purple.
You see Black Sabbath coming into the picture
Yep.
from bands from England, of course.
Yep.
And then you have your bands here in the States, like Aerosmith,
Aerosmith.
Kiss,
Yeah. They
Rush,
were starting to do their thing.
AC/DC,
Mhm.
to a certain extent, Van Halen towards the
Right.
late '70s.
Right.
But for you, how do you look back at the 1970s as a
At that time,
in your where were you at that point as a musician?
At that point, I was already in my 20s,
Mhm.
and I had gotten married, and now the responsibility kind of hits. I had already been playing now in bands. When I first started in my teens and came back from Mexico,
Mhm.
I got into a band. They hired me. I was the youngest kid in the band with a bunch of older guys, but they had been playing for a while.
Mhm.
But I started playing in the band, and since then I had been in bands that whole time. So here come the '70s, and now I'm married, and so now the responsibility thing happens. But I don't have any. I graduated from high school from Robert E. Lee in Baytown,
Mhm.
and but I hadn't gone to college yet, and I was now having to make money, so I had to figure out how am I going to make money playing. And I had joined, while I was married, I had joined a couple of bands that were doing the creative thing, but that wasn't getting us anywhere, because the times were changing.
Mhm.
There weren't a whole lot of gigs for creative. They wanted to dance.
Mm.
And now they wanted commercial. Now places like the Holiday Inns were starting to book bands in their clubs all over the U.S. The Hiltons, the hotels, the Holiday Inns had their own club inside of their hotel, and there were bands for 5 days, nights a week there. So I got into bands that were touring the U.S. You'd be 2 months in Dallas,
Mhm.
2 months in New Mexico, 2 months in Arizona. You'd be doing a tour. A booking agent would be hiring you to do a tour, 2 months here, a month here, 2 months here, and they were mostly hotels like the Hiltons and the Holiday Inns, and I was making good money. They were giving me a salary, a good salary, and I would play 5 nights a week. But you had to dress up kind of the way you didn't want to. Times were changing. Remember, the electronics were starting to come in.
Right, right.
And a lot of pop and a lot of
Disco.
disco was starting to come in, and it was a clash between the creative elements of music and pushing a button and just starting the music, And there was a lot of pop, commercial pop hits that you had to play. When I went to a gig at night, when I got ready for a gig at the Holiday Inn on a Wednesday night, that I had to play 5 nights a week, and I was stuck somewhere in Farmington, New Mexico, little town, and they're giving you the room free, and they're giving you half price on meals. So you're able to save a lot of your money, which is good. So I was sending a lot of it home, to be saved, because I could stay in the room free. So life was easy, but creatively it wasn't that hip. So what you had to learn was anything that was on the radio, you had to learn to play.
You have to learn to adapt.
And you had to play those songs, because that was the songs that when you went to play at night, your crowd that paid money to get in, that were paying money for drinks, they weren't hip to the B side of a Jimi Hendrix or
or obscure song.
Animals that we were hip to. They just saw the new John Denver song, all the commercial stuff that was coming out on the radio. They want to hear that, and they want to dance to that, mixed in with a couple of cool tunes here and there, but the rest was commercial stuff, and you had to dress kind of the same. I hated it because I thought I looked like a clown, but the saving grace was that nobody I knew that was hip was in there. So I was around people who thought that was cool, so I went, okay, I can get away with it, and it's my job.
Plus you're getting paid.
And plus I'm getting paid, so I had to start learning. Here's where a lot of the creative musicians, if you're going to play full time, that if you want to continue your creative input and do you're working on an album or something that your creative outlet is being, but in the meantime you're having to do a job. Well, instead of me having to go to the plant and work hard labor because I didn't have a college education, I was already good enough to be in bands that were making just as much money, just playing guitar.
Professionally.
Easy living and playing guitar and playing 5 nights a week and the easy life. And so all I had to do was play those songs. And I did that 5 nights a week. And so I traveled around the country doing that, touring, all the way from here to, you name it, California, all the way into Canada, playing the hotels. But living a really good life,
right.
And having to make the decision that I'm going to have to do this if I want to play guitar, and live the creative, not the creative life, but the playing guitar. But it enabled me to play guitar and live an easier life than going to the plant.
Right. How hard is it you mentioned before that you were married when you were starting out?
Yeah, I was 21 when I got married, and it was pretty young to get married.
So how hard is it? I mean, at any age, of course, late 20s or 30s, I mean, getting married is still a huge responsibility,
yes.
Whether you have a job or
yes.
if you have an education. How hard is it for a musician to have those responsibilities?
That was real hard for me. That was real hard for me. And anybody I knew that was playing music like I was and had to go do the 5 nights a week playing in hotels, that was real hard if they got married at a young age. Because looking back on it, I was married for like 5 years, but it was very difficult to sustain that married life because she had to travel with me. And at times there were times when we weren't getting along because we were living in such close quarters, and I knew nothing about the marriage life,
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out, what is this about? How do I do this music thing, and how do I sustain this married thing? And it was tough. So I wouldn't advise anybody at that age. That was too young, because you're still trying to figure it out. You're still trying to get your education, and you're still trying to figure out what you're going to do, And in the meantime, if you're having to think about the marriage thing, it's an incredible amount of strain on it, I'd say wait.
And you got, obviously, on both ends, you have to be on the same page.
Yes.
There's nothing worse when you're not on the same page.
Exactly. And at that time, my wife she wasn't a musician, so what does she do? If she travels with me, at one point she gets bored, I'm gone for all those hours at night. I don't come in till 3 o'clock in the morning. What does she do? Watch TV? Well, maybe for 3 or 4 days, but for months and years, that gets tiring. And then what does she want to do?
Right.
How do you do that? Okay, now maybe she needs to go to college, and now you're going to be apart, and you're still too immature to sustain that, to go, well, I don't want to be apart. Well, somebody's going to have to suffer, too young.
Myself right now, I'm currently in a relationship right now, but it's nothing to the point where there's a commitment for marriage. Because I'm 23. What do I know about? I'm on my way out of graduating college and everything, and it took a starting point, but there's still a lot to do.
Man, I'm 63 now, and even since that first marriage, I've gone through quite a few relationships and put in some serious time in each of them. Some were not as long as others, but I say wait till you're even when you think you're sure, wait again. You know,
Think about it.
Think about you think you're sure? No, wait. And main thing is you're not going to be able to be happy unless if you do what you need to do, you know, and get yourself financially stable and creatively or whatever you're going to decide to do. And maybe you're not going to decide maybe till you're 40, 45. You may still be changing and changing and changing.
I hear a lot of guys getting married in their late 40s and up until their 50s.
Yeah. Well,
or having kids.
Yeah.
For that matter.
You can, but remember, once you start having kids, that's
a whole other beast.
Man, that's a whole other beast. That's incredible. So really, you wouldn't do yourself and your partner until. So wait.
Right. You're not doing anybody any favors.
This love thing changes.
It does.
It changes, you know.
From what I've heard.
It does. It changes. And you'd be surprised, you know, from what I've learned from relationship-wise from when I was 21 to now, which I'm in my early 60s, I've gone through numerous relationships and love. And each one of them, I thought, this is it.
This is the one.
It's not. It's not. So now I'm at the point where I go, I know now that that's not it. So just take it easy.
And respect the other person's wishes. Because, I mean, the girl I'm with right now, my girlfriend, I mean, she has a great career ahead of her, you know, majoring in psychology.
Right.
Doing a teaching assistant job right now and internship here and there. And just trying to juggle everything. And it's I've seen it all the time with the people I've come up with from high school. And it's just, you put a kid in the mix, it's like, man, it just throws everything.
It throws everything, and you might shortchange everything else. You may not be able to do everything that you need to do, you know, creative or career-wise.
And you might think, I mean, you see pictures and stuff, you might think, oh, yeah, they're happy. Well, you don't know half of it.
No,
you don't know
not
even,
way more than half of it, you know. So that's probably the most important thing is and you mentioned one thing about respecting the other person.
Right.
As I've gone through my years, that seems to be more and more important, is respecting that other person. And even when they think they know about, no, we should, no. Because we may not respect each other in 5 years, 6 years, because of the strain of things. So very important to reevaluate that.
Right. You have to know where he or she comes from, and he or she has to know where you come from.
Exactly. And give it even more time.
More time, exactly.
So,
and towards the tail end of the 1970s, you have a guitar player like Eddie Van Halen come up into the scene, and I hear my dad tells me all the time, man, I remember when that first Van Halen album came out in '78. He was like 16.
Right.
He's like, I remember listening to it on a long play vinyl, and I'm like, man, I could just imagine what that was like, because I mean, you look at today, a new song comes out or whatever, it's not as, not to sound corny here, but it's not as magical. It's not as, it doesn't impact you as much.
No, that was, when Eddie came out, it was kind of like when Hendrix came out. When I first heard Hendrix, I was in high school. And when he first came out, it was on the radio, and it was either Purple Haze or, what other song?
Voodoo Child?
Not Voodoo Child, but well, something like Purple Haze.
Right.
But when it came out, it blew everybody's mind of what they had thought guitar playing could be like. Same with Eddie. When you heard that Eruption thing come out, and you're just listening to it, going, how is that possible?
How's he doing that?
and how incredibly involved it was, and how into it he was. It was truly magical. And I saw him do it at I forget what concert it was in I saw him a couple of times in Houston, and when I saw him do that, he was so relaxed. He just got on the edge of the stage. Everybody all the other musicians got off to the side, and he just went into this Eruption thing. And he was so relaxed, but he was doing this incredible stuff, and it was wonderful, wonderful guitar playing.
I've read a lot of stories about him, where he would lock himself in his room and just play.
Yes.
Play and just play.
Well, it would take that. It would take that. I mean, it would take total devotion and hours and hours. If you're going to get good at something, remember, there's 1,000 other guys spending more hours than you are inside locked in. So
you got to work much harder.
Yeah, and more.
and then more.
So look at it that way.
And towards the late 70s, you jump off into the 1980s,
Right.
which was a whole nother
Right.
decade of what they call, I mean, every decade, but they call it the decade of debauchery and
Right.
stuff like that. You have things like cocaine coming into the scene and
Right.
all these heavy drugs.
Right.
And all these bands, like, you have the whole hair band scene coming
Right.
through the MTV era.
Right.
Bands like Motley Crue,
Right.
Quiet Riot, Twisted
Right.
Sister,
Right.
even to the later bands that made it on MTV, like they got picked up, like Bon Jovi
Right.
and Whitesnake.
Right.
But for you, how was that like for you?
That was
Touring the throughout the decade,
right.
catching concerts.
Well, at that time, I was also playing a little bit of the. At that time, the 5 days a week at a club was at its height, and you couldn't work in like the hair guys started coming in, and it wasn't quite as guitar stuff as like Eddie was as involved. Eddie Van Halen was, so.
It was more of an image,
Right.
When there were, I guess, when the whole MTV explosion happened.
Right, it was.
You had to, were people listening with their eyes,
Right.
rather than what
Exactly, and so you had to look that whole thing, but that was going to end. That was going to end too, and only a few of those people actually came out of it, like John Bon Jovi.
Right.
He actually came out of it truly still writing and writing viable songs that were actually good.
He's one of those artists I look at. I'm like, man, it's amazing how he made that transition from being just instead of having that label as a hair band into
Right.
transitioning into the 90s and
Well,
up to
some of them
today.
were really gifted. Some of them were
Right.
the real thing, whereas the majority of them weren't.
Right.
They weren't. Yeah, and you could see at the end of it, you could see who was the fake ones, who were the, and even who were the two guys that ended up Nilly Vanilli. Remember that stuff?
Right.
Gosh, it was like the debauchery thing was at its height too. It was like, oh gosh, just terrible stuff.
I don't know if you've ever seen that documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization.
No, I haven't
Part 2.
seen it.
It talks about mainly that scene.
Okay.
Of all I think it was at the height of it, maybe like the late 80s.
Right.
You have all these bands like Winger and
Right.
Warrant coming out.
Right.
All like just doing it because, I mean, it was already there.
Right. It was.
So-
And some of those guitar players were pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
And some of those singers
amazing.
were pretty good. But you have to be more than that to come out of it and go into the next decade, and the next thing coming in. And most of those guys fell off,
And even with other genres, like, that were more underground, like thrash, for example, bands like Metallica,
Right.
Megadeth,
Right.
Slayer, and even Anthrax,
Right?
they were even able to come out of that whole thrash scene into
Right.
the mainstream.
Right. They were.
And it's just amazing. I mean, looking back, even towards the late 80s, you'd probably have bands. In order to make it on MTV, you had to have a ballad. You have to look a certain way.
Yes.
This and that.
Yep.
Otherwise, you weren't getting any attention.
Yeah.
Even after that, if you fell off and you became one of those. Where are they now? Or
Yeah.
that guitar player from the 80s.
Right.
Or, you don't want. That's the last thing you want to be labeled as.
Yeah, and you couldn't make that transition. Where are you now? And you don't know where they're at. And but also one of the things that around the late 80s, early 90s, that I started getting hip to. By this time, I've been playing guitar a long time, and my ear is always looking for something. Not just those guys. Not just those guitar players like Eddie and those guys, but also I was into jazz. I was starting to get into jazz, and there's this whole at that time it was starting to come out all this L.A. movement of these guitar players that are playing kind of commercial jazz, but even heavy jazz, and guitarists and pianists and different instrumentalists that were just phenomenal. And I started getting into that. There was one of the guys that I'm still into is a guy named Larry Carlton.
Oh,
and,
right.
And so he was in it. Al Di Meola was a heavier kind, more in the Latino end, but he was with what's it, the piano player. He was Di Meola. I'll think of it. But all these really great musicians that were not like the pop guys. These guys were really studied, and that's where GIT in California opened up. The Guitar Institute,
and that's where you actually had like that explosion of on that end. You have guitarists like Steve Vai coming out, Yngwie Malmsteen, Satriani.
Joe Satriani,
just a handful of,
and they're the real thing. They're the real thing, and those are they're not now. Not only are they locking themselves in the room practicing 24 hours a day, but now they're studying theory. Now they're studying all that harmony and all that. So these guys are truly gifted. Larry Carlton can conduct a symphony, and he writes most of his. Although he's known for his guitar playing, I read that he writes most of his stuff on piano. So these guys are truly gifted writers, conductors, and arrangers, and all that. So now, and that way. Now you could transition yourself from each decade to go and do sessions and to go stuff that people don't hear about, but you're getting paid good money for in the background doing for movies,
right?
The guitar parts and reading and all that stuff. So that's the part that I like, that I have gone into now is studying music that way. The real session players, the guys doing the sessions, and being able to play a pop song, a jazz song, or just one or two chords, play them the right way, or a line, or read something music-wise, or a chord chart. Now, when I get asked to go do a gig, just to pick up a gig, let's say somebody calls me and says, "Hey, Heli, our guitar player is not going to be able to make it this weekend. Can you do a gig? We're playing over here at Sambuca." And go, okay, what kind of stuff are y'all doing? Well, we're doing the basic Jobim, Antonio Carlos Jobim, some of the South American stuff, some of that kind of jazz. They'll usually give you a book with the chord charts in it. So you have to kind of know how to read a chord chart.
So then you become that person. You become reliable.
Yes.
Where people say, "Hey, you can like if we need a guitar player, say, hey, call this guy."
Yes. Yeah. Then you have a name. Then they know that they can count on you for the important things. Be there on time. Be there dressed the part. Be there sober. Be all that kind of stuff, and be able to read a chord chart. And usually the guitar players like myself that go in to do those gigs, you've already done that material. You've not only done the country songs, but you've done all the South American jazz tunes. You've done the pop songs. You have thousands of songs to pick from. And at that point, even if you've never played it, if you've heard it, you can, in your mind, you just ask for the key. Well, what key are y'all doing it? Oh, we're doing it in G. Oh, it's a 1-4-5. Well, a 1-4-5 comes from it's the one chord is G, the 4 is the C, and the 5 is the D. So that comes from the major scale in G.
Right.
So you have to analyze that in 2 seconds and be able to play it when they count it off. You don't have time to go, well, what's it? No, you don't. You have to. They're going to count it off. You better play it. So. Yeah, most of the guitar players that I'm around and musicians, they've already done all that stuff. They can read it, and they're ready to do all the right things. So.
And that's where being a professional musician comes in.
Yes.
That's where the professional part comes in.
Exactly.
It's not just getting up there, oh, what song are you going to play? Whoa, I don't know how to play that song. Can we
Can we do another one? You don't have time.
The set list is here. And
exactly.
We're going on in 5.
Well, you're talking about they're counting it off. They don't have time for you, So
it's very, to me, it's always very important to, when it comes to music, whether you're a guitarist or a drummer, be hip to different types of styles, not just I mean, you can still listen to your favorite songs. I mean, nothing wrong with that.
course.
But be aware of
All the rest.
everything that's going on. And like I was talking to another person previously, about becoming famous and rich and blah blah blah. You know, if you're doing it to become for those reasons, then you have to be aware of what's going on right now as far as
Right.
billboards and
Right?
awards and stuff like that. So if you want to get to that level, then you kind of have to go in a certain direction.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to be around professional musicians
Right.
that are going to see right through you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ask you to get up and play with them or to do a particular song, they don't have time,
Mm-mm.
not even 3 seconds. They're counting it off.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, they're going to want you to do a ride in the middle of it. They're going to
Mhm.
want you to do a solo in the middle of it. So you better not only know how to play the song and be ready to do it,
Right.
be dressed the right way, on time, sober, the whole thing, but to do a killer solo in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's a lot of pressure.
it's a lot of pressure. But if you're a pro,
Mhm. You'll wing it.
you've gotten yourself to do ready for all that training. So it pays to be a professional in all those respects, and not to have your mind closed,
Right.
and to go, I'm not into that, man. I'm not into that. Right away, when you hear somebody say, I'm not into that, man, it says to me, I've closed my mind to this.
Right.
Less knowledge.
Right. I've heard that famous story that Steve Vai gives when he auditioned for, I think it was Frank Zappa. He used to play with Frank Zappa
Right.
back in I think it was the late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Right?
He would tell him to play a certain, I don't know if it was chord or scale.
Scale.
And he would say, okay, play it in this key.
Right?
He would play it in that key. Okay, play it in this key now, but add this to it.
Right?
He would do that. Okay, play it, and he would just keep adding and
Right.
adding and adding. It would keep getting more difficult, more
Right.
difficult. I guess, just to test him to see
Yes.
if he was up for the part.
Frank Zappa was famous for that. He was such a great leader and musician. He would test his musicians, and he
Right.
would get the best guys around. He would know which guys were the guys that they were talking about coming out of the universities. And these guys that were gifted, that knew all that. So you better be hip to all that. Not just the tone of your rock guitar, but these scales and all the different keys to do them in, and so
Right.
forth. So
It's something else you can bring into the picture
Yes.
later on.
Yes.
You got to know the fundamentals first.
exactly.
And for you, how was it transitioning to the 1990s when you have suddenly all the MTV bands, not MTV bands, but everything is wiped out. The slate is clean. You have bands like Nirvana coming in,
Right.
Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, more of your grunge type of bands.
Right.
How was it like? How was it like that for you coming into that scene?
At that point, you're now kind of watching what's changing around you,
Mm-hmm.
and like those bands, and you saw what Nirvana was going through, with the drug thing was still kicking some of those people's butts, and you were being careful because now for me, I'm already now a professional musician gigging around town, not necessarily doing those songs, but I'm watching from the outside, looking at what's going on, and I'm going, where is this gonna go? And that's kind of where I was at on that, because I never had to do those songs live,
Right,
that-
right.
to make a living, but I was definitely watching and listening, and also I was teaching by this point. And I was teaching a lot, so I had to be ready for any conceivable kind of music they put in front of me, all those. So I had to be hip to all that, and I was hip to it. I wanted to be hip to that. I didn't want not know. I had to be hip because they wanted to know. So
Could you kind of see it, I guess, foreshadowing as to what was going to happen, like, for that type of scene, like, whether it was, like, the 70s or 80s or 90s with the prevalence of drugs and stuff like that? Could you kind of, like, in your mind say, well, it's not going to end well?
Well, we knew that it wasn't ending well all through those years because every decade you so many musicians were dropping off the map, dying,
Right.
And now with Nirvana, I remember at that point, they were at that point where they were doing. It almost seemed like they were confused as to how do I do this creative thing.
With all the fame and fortune.
With all the fame and fortune, it's like
it.
it was overwhelming to them,
And some people can't handle that.
No,
all that.
No, and that's what I saw was that it was like they were overwhelmed, and I'm going, well, I don't want to be part of that. At that point, I wasn't doing those kind of clubs anymore,
Right.
Because there were some rock bands that were playing rock clubs in Houston, playing that kind of material, but you're not making money anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're trying to live out your creative end, but at the same time, be careful not to get in that lifestyle, which is hard, especially with rock clubs. It was hard to get out. It's hard to, hear the girls on the breaks, hear the guys with the cocaine and all that, and that's gonna kill you,
So what you're saying, it was very available. Like
yes,
you had it
yes.
right in front of you.
Yes, and not only just with rock bands, but I was in Las Vegas for 2 years, and I was playing.
My dad mentioned that you were living out in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I was living in Las Vegas, and I was at that time I was playing all the casinos. I was playing they have the main rooms where the big artists are playing, and then you have the smaller club rooms in each of the casinos. And I was playing those. When I got there, I made myself known. I went to all these little casinos, and I introduced myself to the bands that were playing these. And they would have, they would need a guitar player from time to time. So I worked my way in. And then I got in with a Latino band playing at a Latino club, and it was 5 nights a week. But again, this was a Latino club, and it was at the height of the cocaine. Man, I could get off the break and walk into the restroom to use the restroom, and there'd be 4 or 5 Cubans out in the open passing it free to people so that they would get a free hit, and eventually they would be buying it. You know what I mean? They were making customers. They were. You thought they were giving it to you for free, but you were going to get hooked on it, and eventually you were going to be buying it for $100 a little bag.
We're giving out samples in the restroom,
and it's a nowhere place to go.
Yeah.
Because it destroys your life. You feel bad. You're spending all your money, and you do things that you wouldn't normally do.
It's a bad habit.
That you find yourself going, why did I do that?
And it's amazing to hear about musicians like yourself be able to just plow right ahead through that and just, I guess, not partake in any of that.
Well, I mean, make no mistake, I partook in a little bit of it.
Oh, absolutely.
I did. But
not fall victim.
No, I didn't fall victim. I didn't die from it. I got away from it. I could see clearly what it did and what it didn't do, and it did absolutely nothing, and it ruined a lot of my friends' lives, musicians, and some died, and not only the ones that were famous, but the ones that you'd never heard about, died too,
that's a shame.
So a lot of gifted ones, and so that has no place in it, and it takes the fun out of your creative, the thing you're wanting to do.
Oh yeah.
It takes all the fun out of it, because now you're a slave to this,
I've heard of many stories as well, like watching these VH1 documentaries and stuff like that. A band like Rat from back in the 1980s headlining stadiums all over the states, all over the world, and then suddenly that drug habit kicks in with one of the members, and it all just
ruins it.
It just ruins it for everybody.
They go through turmoil. They go through real hard times because they're having to deal with this member or 2 of them. And what if it's the real gifted guy in the band? What about him? You're going to have to let him go? Or
one of the guitar players from Rat, Robin Crosby is his name. He was amazing guitar player.
Right.
Mainly a rhythm guitarist, but he can pull off some great leads.
Right.
Coming out of that scene. just fell victim to the whole
thing.
heroin thing, and
Oh.
and he never came out of it.
Wow.
Eventually, throughout the 90s, he contracted, I
HIV?
believe it was HIV.
Oh my God.
And he died in 2002, not from HIV. He died of a heroin overdose.
Really?
He said in a documentary, one of his last interviews, he says, "If I'm going out in flames."
Right.
I'm like, man, that's a bad place to be.
Yeah, it is. When you know you're going to go out,
Mhm.
and you're going to have to go out.
And I mean, looking at him back then, he was a great-looking guy, blonde haired,
Right.
tall.
had everything going for him.
In his last interview, you look at him, he's almost like 300-400 pounds. It's like,
Right.
what happened, man?
Yeah. Well, there
It's
you
like,
go.
jeez.
There you go. So,
And his guitar playing ability is not where it used to
right, it's gone.
be. It's gone. So
Yeah.
it's really a shame to
Yeah.
hear all these casualties that go on.
Yeah.
You go on bands like them, you make really good money,
All right.
platinum gold albums,
Right.
and then you try to go on tour now and you can't even fill a club or
Right.
an arena. It's
Nobody
sad.
will even almost hire you because they
Sad.
don't know if you're gonna be right.
Mhm.
So, and that's one thing I never got into is the heroin thing. I never
Mhm.
got into that, and
It's
thank
scary.
God, because man, that scared the heck out of me. But
Mhm.
but I knew a few people that were into that, and it was a scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And but that insured your fall.
Mhm.
Cocaine's going to do it, but heroin's is going to insure it.
Mhm.
So you might as well you let it. You might as well give up.
I hear Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, I'm sure you're familiar with him,
Right.
talk about it all the time, that he OD'd and pretty much died for
Right.
about, I think it was 5 minutes.
Right.
And then they brought him back.
Right.
And they asked him what it was like to be in that position. He's like, well, I just saw myself just lying there.
Right.
It's like, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. So
To know that you're dead.
right.
And
So
it's like, he got a second chance, and since then, I mean, it had to get to that point for him to get clean and sober. Even I think about a couple hours after that, he still shot up.
all right.
And I think that was his last time,
His
but
last
it took
hurrah.
that much for him to get off it.
Right. Well.
And it sucks when it has to take that much
Yeah.
for you to get off something like
Yeah, and pretty much it's going to take away whatever you
Mhm.
have that you value.
that. Your life, pretty much.
Everything having to do with that's valuable to
Mhm.
you,
It's gone.
it's going to go. It's going to rob it of you, and you might survive it, but it's going to rob you of it.
Mhm.
So not worth it.
No, it's financially much less. 'Cause
yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
if I were to be making that much money, I'm like, man, I'd be stashing it away somewhere.
Right. Right. Look at Gene Simmons. Look at
Oh.
look at him.
You look at a band like Kiss,
Smart.
Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, they've held the band for 40 years.
Right.
And he always talks about it in his interviews. I've never been high or drunk in my life. It just does nothing for me.
It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful.
And he's your age. He's
Right.
your age. He's in his early 60s.
Right.
I mean,
Jeff Beck was like that. He didn't get high. He didn't do anything. He drank, but
Mhm.
it never became a problem.
Right.
But he wasn't into the heroin, cocaine, any
Mhm.
of that kind of stuff.
I mean, if you hit, just the way I look at it, if I had that type of money, I'd have the best doctors around.
Yep.
I have, I'd be
Lawyers and
I'd be good.
yeah, you'd be good.
I'd be good.
And that'd be the smartest thing.
Everything would be taken care of. I
Yes.
wouldn't have to be worrying about, when am I gonna go score? How much do I have
Yeah.
left? Or
Yeah.
this and that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be worrying about that stuff.
Yeah.
Going into the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
How were you transitioning then? I mean, you mentioned you were already teaching.
Yes, I
by
was.
the 1990s.
Yes, I was already teaching by the mid and end of the 90s. I was
Mhm.
already teaching. At one point, I had 50, 60 students a week.
Wow.
One in, one out. Every day, one in, one out, one in. It got to be, I was making a lot of money,
Mhm.
and then also playing gigs at night. But by that time, it wasn't 5 nights a week anymore. Those gigs were gone
Mm-hmm.
because when the economy kind of suffered quite a bit, those gigs disappeared where it was 5 nights a week. Those clubs could no longer sustain that, so
Wow.
they stayed open for maybe 2 nights a week. You know,
Okay.
Maybe
Was that usually towards like the weekends?
right towards
Okay.
the weekends, or maybe special concerts in the middle of the week with big guys, but no longer 5 nights a week with local bands.
Oh, okay.
Those started going away. So since those started going away, but I had already been studying, and I had gone to some of the HCC. I had taken piano lessons at HCC. I took some theory courses. I got hip to all that, and I was reading all the time in Guitar Player magazine, and any magazine, or I was taking classical guitar too. Anything that I could better myself, and I'd already been playing in bands for over 30 years, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to stay competitive more and more and more because I noticed that players like Larry Carlton and those guys were that knowledgeable. You know, so I was going, I want to be one of those kind of guys. You know, I no longer just want to just be able to play in bands. I want to study the whole thing about guitar, the theory. And so I took recording courses, I took theory courses, piano, jazz guitar, classical guitar. So I had teachers teaching me that wanted to take lessons from me, but I wanted to take lessons from them because they were hip to this part of the jazz part, this part of the classical part. So I learned and soaked up as much as possible. So I started teaching a lot.
Where were you teaching at?
I was teaching at a place on Westheimer called Evans Music.
Right.
And I was there for a long time, but I also taught out of my home in Baytown or in Houston. I was teaching at different music stores here and there. So I got in and got out of it, but that's where I learned a lot because I was still practicing hours a day, but now I was being exposed to all my students wanted to learn all the different things. You know?
Right.
So I was having to learn and be hip, constantly be hip to everything that was going on with guitar. And it really was, I was enthusiastic about it. I wasn't closed-minded about it. Even though the guys I was studying might be like Eddie and some of those guys. But I was also studying Larry Carlton, Al Di Meola, a bunch of guys. Like, I was even studying the old greats like Joe Pass, Wes Montgomery, some of those jazz guys, some of those guys. And also studying what the jazz guys that would want you to play at a gig, like Antonio Carlos Jobim, some of those songs that were famous that were done by Frank Sinatra and were done like that. I wanted to learn those songs, you know. So I started learning those songs and what keys they were in. And what's funny is I would get asked a lot of these to play these songs at some of the gigs. And I was hip to them, you know. So
it's amazing.
So, but learning to teach introduced me to a lot of different parts of the guitar playing and the study of it.
Wow.
So there's a lot of knowledge happening there, you know.
There's a lot of knowledge in that head.
Yeah.
How have you transitioned now that present day you have things like social media,
right?
Electronic music it just keeps booming,
right? I think it's a wonderful thing. I think I look at it in the positive sense because whereas before it was really hard to do it at home, or you had to go to a studio and have somebody spend a lot of money on you to get. And there was only 4 tracks back then, you know. But you had to go into a studio and have a lot of money for them to record a CD for you. Now you can do it in the privacy of your own home. And you get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and go, man, I'm feeling creative. Let's do this. Of course, the part that's tough is you have to study the technical side of it, how to make Pro Tools work, how to do this. So you have to learn that part of it too, as we were discussing earlier. Was you have to learn how the microphones, where they hook up, what do they do. But the cool thing is about transitioning is, I love all of it because now you can buy stuff to do it at home.
Right.
I love it. I love the idea, that whole thing.
Yeah, because back then, you'd hear about bands getting together and having we have to book studio time. Well, we can't. Let's try to go for the cheapest that they have. Usually they'll have it at midnight or later on at night.
Yes.
Because that's the cheapest that they have, or sometimes they'll have it for free.
And right. And also, if let's say if you're the guitar player and you're the one writing songs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have a band, and but you're the creative force behind it or part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You no longer have to have the whole band to sit there and get your ideas out. Like tell the drummer, okay, play a straight 4 in this time, and have him play a straight 4, and then tell the bass player, okay, play me a G progression, a 1 6 2 5 progression, this tempo. You can do it at home, without disturbing them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of have a little drum machine, or your Pro Tools will have a drummer inside of it, which you can tell it to do. So at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, without spending any more money, or waking up the guys in the band, or waiting who gets out of work at this time, who gets out of. So you can put the kind of the song together that you want at a pretty good, to where it's pretty comprehensive, and a good idea of what the song is doing, and you can put it together yourself, and the next day or the next couple of days, just give it to the tape to the guys, or a CD of the guys.
Send it off through
MP3. Or send it off yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only gotten better if you look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of people tend to, not a lot of people, but some people tend to say, well, it's got a much, when you look at the business side of it, it has really had a huge impact on it as far as making money and stuff like that. But where, to the point where it's like, well, people aren't buying CDs anymore, they're downloading.
Right.
They have to resort to iTunes or this or that, and where bands are now touring more than ever because they're not making any profit off of.
That's true, and things do change. Things do change, but there's always a way. One of the things that I've learned throughout these years, you can transition from one end to the next, although it may not be to your liking.
Right.
Okay, then, so you ask yourself, God, it's changing. God, I don't like the way it's going right now. This is really affecting. Why are you doing it? Because you love to do it. It comes back to that. And then you find a way to make what you're doing with the new technology, the way it may not be like you said, they're downloading tunes now. They're taking the money out of your pocket from here and there, but you have to find a way to do it. And so if you don't like what they're doing, you have to get back to, why am I doing this? How can I make it, how can I have this work for me? You know? So there's a positive ways, and I'm a big fan of the positive movement of having a positive, mental attitude on all these things. I'm a big proponent of that, is keep looking up and keep strong in the positive sense of it, and build your strength on the till the day you die. Keep that positive thing going and build your strength from there, because it's going to come up to you, and it might come just to that, So it's going to come down to you having that positive movement, and you can either choose to let it defeat you or not. If you like what you're doing, you may have to move to this area and do this that you may not like to do, but there's a way you can make it work if you use your brain and you use your positive mental attitude to do it.
Right. There's nothing worse than somebody that's still stuck living in the 80s or 90s. Well, that's not how we do things anymore.
Right, exactly.
As far as recording goes, or just
all of it.
Playing in general.
Yeah. But there's still a creative part.
Oh, yeah.
It's still there. That what the Beatles did is still being done today in a little room somewhere, differently, approached different ways. The whole medium is different, but there's a creative part that you can still unleash in you, and do what you want to do, and keep that positive strength happening.
Right. My dad mentioned one time that you were out in Korea.
Yes, about
South Korea, was it?
South Korea, about 7 years ago, 8 years ago. In Baytown, there's these couple of guys named Kendrick, and two brothers, and they had been touring every year, kind of like what used to be the USO, which was in the old days, like during World War II. Bob Hope and these guys would tour to entertain the troops while they were going through their hardships and doing wars. They would go and entertain and lift them for just a brief period. very important. And so now, about 8 years ago, these guys approached me because their guitar player that had been going with them couldn't do it anymore. He had been going with them for several years, but now they needed a guitar player. So
Right.
What we did was there's no Holiday Inn in Baytown, and before they were to take off, they said, "Hey, do you want to practice with us and do some gigs at the Holiday Inn in Baytown a couple of months before we go? And would you like to go with us to Korea?" I said, "Yes." Okay, well, this club is opening its doors for us, and we just ended up playing. We never even practiced. We just showed up and played. Started playing at the Holiday Inn for 2 months, like 3 nights a week, and a lot of my buddies from Baytown, friends showed up and had a great time and supported us. And then at the end of the 2 months, we left for Korea. We took the flight. The band is the two brothers, myself, and a couple of other people, singers and drummers, and they took all our gear. The Army was responsible for flying. They already knew how to do all this. The guys in the band, they would take all the gear before we left to this place at the airport, and they flew the Army flew all our stuff to like Seoul, South Korea, and South Korea, North Korea. North Korea is at the top. South, and they went through their and they're still at odds with each other, as you know. And North Korea is crazy. They're crazy, you know. Their way of looking at the world is real closed. They dominate. The leader makes sure that the people, if you don't follow what he does, what he says, your whole family may never be heard from again. So it's not an open society like ours is. So what we did was we got to Seoul, and over the period of about 8 months, we toured from the southernmost part of South Korea to the DMZ, which is the demilitarized zone, which is right where South Korea and North Korea meet, where their soldiers are actually looking at each other. I'm serious. They're looking at each other. They're holding rifles, and there's a line. There's an actual line painted, and their soldiers are on that side, and they're looking at you, like they want to shoot you any second.
Just do something.
We got a tour from the commanders through each of those, especially through the DMZ, and showed us this is and we got to ride in the tanks, the big tanks, the A1 Abrams. They gave us rides in helicopters, so we got to play for all the clubs in South Korea that our soldiers are stationed at. Our Air Force, Marines, the Navy, the whole thing, all the East and West, North and South. We got to live in the bases and played for the soldiers. Is what we would do on a nightly basis. On that one, we did play 4 or 5 nights a week.
That took you back.
It was great. It was great playing for the soldiers, you know.
It's amazing when you're doing something that you like and you're getting you're getting something good out of it.
Yeah, you're getting something good out of it. You're giving to the soldiers,
back,
and they're taking care of you, and they really appreciate that you're doing this for them, and you see it, you feel it when you're playing a song. And one of the soldiers might come up and go, you know, they get pretty rowdy in them clubs, you know, and but they need to let off steam, you know. And
just imagine what they go through.
Exactly, and it's tough. It's really tough over there. And they might come up and ask you, "Can you do this song, man?" And you may not do it, but you kind of halfway remember it, and you do it. You know, the rest of all of us have heard it before. We've done it probably 20 years ago, some song that somebody did, but it's special to them. Well, you do it, even if you don't do it exactly like the record.
Right.
The pros can do the song. You know, it's not going to be hard chords going through it, and you do it, and you kind of halfway remember the words, and they appreciate it 10,000%.
Right.
Because you did it for them. You know, so we did that, and it really opened my eyes, and was a gratitude thing.
Right. It's amazing. I mean, just what the military goes through. I mean, something that I would have never considered doing. I mean, it just hats off to them.
Yes, yes, they really are giving a big portion of their life, if not their entire life. Their ultimate sacrifice. And I really, when I got there to play for them, really opened my eyes to how they live, on a day-to-day basis, and it's a hard life. It's a hard life, and they give it their all, and you would be proud of them. They conduct themselves well, and they're respectful of the people there, and they conduct themselves well. So you'd be proud of them, and I was.
And then you come back and you say, well, what do I have to complain about?
No, yeah, exactly.
Nothing at all.
No.
I'm like, yeah, this happened to my car the other day, but whatever.
Not like that. It's not like that, And not only that, but you also appreciate what they're doing. Like you say, whatever happened to you that day is nothing.
I had a bad hair day, so what?
Yeah, exactly.
It happens.
Exactly.
You have a bad day at work or at school.
No, you see that other thing, and you go, oh, okay, I get it.
I have it good right now.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what.
No matter what. In your time as a professional musician, have you ever had the chance to actually meet like any of your, I'd say, childhood heroes or guitar players that you looked up to? I guess, not to say famous, but at that caliber of
I've been
artists.
Every now and then I've been lucky, where let's see. One time I was in I believe it was Abilene, Texas, and we were playing one of those 5 nights a week Holiday Inn, and it was at the height of Fleetwood Mac. And Fleetwood Mac has a long history, and I know that's history, and it's totally different from when they got famous. The ones that you and I heard on the radio.
Right.
I studied them when they were totally different band, a blues band. Before, when they had different members, and the only original member from there was Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, the bass player. But
so this was before Stevie Nicks.
No, when I got to meet them, it was when they were in.
Okay.
So, but I know their history.
You knew them before.
I know their history. But this time, what was happening was, I was playing there at that club, at that hotel, and we had heard that they were coming in that day to give a concert in Abilene. Okay, so I said, well, they got to stay at a hotel, and we're at the Happening Hotel. So I said, they're going to stay here. So I had gone out to do something, taken my car to do some shopping or something. Came back, and it was about 2 o'clock or 1:30, and came into the hotel, and there they were. They were sitting down next to the pool, and I said, okay, all right. And I went straight up to them, said, how's it going? They were the nicest people, and it was Stevie Nicks and all of them. They were just sitting there, and I told them.
Were you kind of in awe when you first saw them? You were like,
oh yeah, definitely. But I was prepared. I was prepared to keep my cool, I didn't want to be too.
You're like,
whoa, man,
big
God,
fan.
Man, kiss your feet. No, I said, hey, and you got to be careful not to do that, because they've had millions of people do that.
Right. You kind of have to pass through and say, how's it going, guys?
Yeah, exactly.
From one musician to the other.
But I had a bit better deal because I could walk in and I said, I'm in the band playing the hotel tonight. So I had a little bit extra better card to play. I'm cool too, man. So anyway, we sat down and talked. I told him, yeah, we're here. And I said, what are y'all here? What are y'all gonna do till y'all play? And they said, well, we got to go do a sound check. So and they said, okay. I said, well, we're gonna be in the club. How late are you guys playing? And they said, well, we're playing until like 11:30 or something, starting at like 8 to 11:30 or something. And I said, well, we don't finish till 1 o'clock. They said, oh, we'll be in there. So we sat and talked for a while, and they were goofing off and having a good time. And then they left to their rooms later to go do their sound check. And then they went and did their concert. And we didn't bother them after that, So we're in the club playing, and I'm on stage and I'm doing but of course we're doing really commercial corny tunes, you know. So I'm kind of halfway going, I hope they don't walk in, I got it good, but God, you look, I don't want them to stand in front of me and do that. Yeah, that's part of what you got to, that's dues you have to pay that way.
Right,
So
right. As soon as you come in and start playing like a Van Halen, like I don't know,
exactly,
or some Hendrix type of song.
Exactly. So, sure enough, I'm playing about 11:30 or 12 o'clock. They walk in and they sit right in front of me. I mean, like from here to right there. You know, all of them. And they're just kind of goofing off. They're sitting around. They're getting, and they're having a couple of drinks. They're together. You know, they're pretty. They're letting off steam, but they're pretty together business wise too. And it just so happened that, and they started screaming off, do "Oh Well," which was one of the songs before when they were in their early years that I remember, and it was when other guitar players were there. "Oh Well" was a famous tune that Fleetwood Mac did when they were in their very formative years. We're talking about late 1960s, Wow. "Oh Well" was a very famous song in those days. In the like, hippie days.
This is my shot right here.
Yeah, exactly. So they were going, "Oh Well, play Oh Well." And the guys I knew it, but the guys that I was with had no idea what that was. So we couldn't do it. But to make a long story short, after the club, after we were finished at 1 o'clock, they stayed the whole night. But we had the key to the club. And because we would go in and practice afterwards.
Right.
So we told them, we got the key to the club. So after everybody left, got out of there after 1 o'clock, they went to their room, we went to our room, we changed our clothes, came back, opened the club, and they came in, and it was just us and them, and we locked the door behind us, and we jammed for hours.
Jeez.
We jammed for hours, just us, and they ended up practicing what was going to be the Rumors album in front of us. They were practicing the Rumors. They were going, no, it's this part. So we were hearing the Rumors album before it came out.
It's amazing.
Also, I got to meet Jeff Beck.
Oh, wow.
I got to meet Jeff Beck. I was playing a Sunday brunch jazz gig up in North Houston at Greens Point at one of the hotels. And they were staying there. They had done the concert the night before at the Woodlands. But them and Santana had been on the same bill, Santana and Jeff Beck.
What a bill.
Yeah, what a bill. And when we were playing in the morning, we could see them coming out, checking out. And the guys in the band it was just a trio that I was with, and they were saying...
Was this Jeff Beck and Santana, or Jeff Beck's
both
group?
Different bands, but they came out at the end and jammed together.
Oh, wow.
They actually... different Santana's band and Jeff Beck's band, but then at the end they jammed together.
Okay, they played together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I saw them checking out, and we took a break, and they were going to a bus, to a bus that they had traveled in for a little bit. And I ran outside, man. I had to catch Jeff Beck or Santana, whichever one I could catch. And sure enough, there was only one guy outside the bus, and it was Jeff Beck. He was smoking a cigarette. So I walked right up to him, and he was the nicest guy. We talked for about 10 minutes. Wow. And then he got in the bus, and they left. So, and also got to meet Larry Carlton and got to play a little bit backstage with him on his guitars.
Wow.
At a club on Washington. What was that club? I'll remember the name of it. But he was at the end of the night. They had finished playing, and I went to the back because I'd played that club too, and it was a little bitty club. And went to the back, and he was back there by himself, and he had his guitars there, and he welcomed me in, and I told him, I'm in a band that plays some of your songs here in town. And I started playing some of the songs, and he goes, oh, you do it like that. This is the way I do it. So he was showing me how he was doing it. And so I was getting a lesson right there.
Wow.
So, yes, I've gotten to meet a few, not a bunch.
No, it's amazing when you get to meet your childhood heroes like that.
Really.
So I've gotten to meet several, from wrestlers to musicians. It's just, looking back, I'm like, man, I would have never thought I'd meet these guys.
Right. Exactly.
And I've gotten to the person I've met the most recently is a wrestler named Chris Jericho. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not familiar with that.
But he's been around for quite a while. He's been wrestling since he was like 18, 19,
Okay.
since like 1990.
What's his name?
Chris Jericho.
Okay.
He transitioned into having his own band.
Really?
And I catched his band like a month ago at the
Okay.
Scout Bar out by NASA.
Okay.
And he's just another guy who you would never. I mean, he's just the nicest guy.
Right.
Like, it's amazing when you see people like that at that high level.
That level.
That are just so nice, because you
Yeah.
hear about other people that are just straight up jerks. Like,
Yeah.
they don't appreciate their fans, or they don't even take time for like an autograph or just a simple
Exactly.
picture. It's like, well,
It really turns you off
Mhm.
when they're just when they're jerks like
Mhm.
that, you know. And I don't have any respect for them if they're like. There's no need for that,
Mm-mm.
you know. So, yeah, it's wonderful to meet the guys that you.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And up until when I first started college, about 5 years ago, I just started going to concerts. I mean, I'm way much younger,
Right.
obviously, but from my first concert being Kiss, later on to go seeing bands like Rush and Van Halen, I just
Right.
saw like 3 years ago. It's just amazing going to concerts to, the stuff that my dad listened to
Right.
back then.
You never thought you'd get that chance.
Never thought, and it might seem odd to people out there. I'm 23 and I listen to that type of music. Well, it's just something that I grew up on and I just enjoy listening to.
Yeah, you
And,
appreciate it.
my dad, I mean, I don't know how many, he never went to that many concerts before.
Right,
Up until
right.
now, it's like, man, I would have never thought I would end up going to these concerts for you guys.
Yeah.
Like, just, when was this? About 2 years ago, we went to go see Black Sabbath at the
Okay.
Pavilion.
Uh-huh.
This was with Ozzy Osbourne, like the original lineup.
Right.
It was just amazing.
Where'd you see them at?
At the Pavilion out in the Woodlands.
Woodlands.
Yeah,
Okay.
they had just done a new album, their first with Ozzy since like the late 70s.
Uh-huh.
So it had been a long time.
Are you familiar with the guitar player that was with Ozzy? Randy Rhoads.
Yes.
Randy
yes,
Rhoads.
yes.
I got to be hip to him at a certain time when I was teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and I read that whole story about how that whole thing happened, and his
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, me too. His involvement with Ozzy and that whole thing. How Ozzy was at the point where he was going to give up.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to give up, and
Right.
he was disillusioned and everything. And he took this one last try, and he hired. He had been recommended Randy, and it just totally changed him,
Right.
to a new person that he is now. That he's for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But Randy ended up dying.
Right. That last Black Sabbath album, I think the last one they released was in maybe 78 or
Okay.
79 with Ozzy.
Wh-
I think it was called, which one was it? I'm trying to remember here.
Who was playing guitar at that point?
With who? With Sabbath or with Ozzy?
With Ozzy or with
Well,
Sabbath?
first at that point, it was Black Sabbath, so it was Ozzy, Tony Iommi.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
So by that point, I mean, they were at the height of, they were like at
At
each
their-
other's throats with
Right,
drugs and money and this
right.
and that. And like you said, Ozzy was at that point where it got to the point where he got fired from
Right.
Black Sabbath.
Right,
And he was down in the dumps. And
right,
along comes Randy Rhoads.
Right.
And then this EP comes out, Blizzard of Oz.
right,
You have songs like Crazy Train,
right,
Suicide Solution.
right.
It just took guitar playing to a whole
It
nother
was
level.
like Eddie. It was like him and Eddie were like,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to be more famous?
Right,
Because
right.
if Randy would have stayed alive,
Mhm.
it's hard to say. But I mean, Eddie is as incredible as he is. So that'd
Right.
be but it would have been wonderful to see them get to be wonderful,
Right,
both
right.
of them.
And it's just so tragic that he got taken away at such an early age. I think he was 27 as well at the time.
Yeah,
when he got
probably.
killed.
You're right, and
And-
it was unnecessary, and
I was reading the bass player. His name's Rudy Zarzo.
okay,
I don't know if
that's
you've
right.
heard of him.
Yeah, I have
He's
certainly.
played with everybody from
Yeah,
Whitesnake,
I've heard I've seen his name everywhere.
from Whitesnake to Ozzy to Steve Vai, Dio.
Right.
And he says that that morning, I think he was in the tour bus sleeping with Ozzy and I think his wife at the time, Sharon.
Right.
And I think they asked Randy if he wanted to take a ride on the plane. I think it
Right.
was to get there faster. I don't know how
No,
the whole
no,
deal
no.
went.
What it was.
How did that work?
What it was the somehow they ended up at this farm. At this farm,
Right,
a
right.
friend of a friend had this farm, and on that farm he had one of those little dust croppers, airplanes.
Right.
And they traveled in a bus because Randy never liked to travel in a plane because he was afraid
He
of
was
them.
scared. Uh-huh.
But when Ozzy and them went to sleep, somehow the guy that flew the plane that was the guy at the farm talked Randy and somebody else to get up in the plane while they were sleeping. While they were just resting,
Right.
and somehow he talked him into something he never liked to do. And they were buzzing the bus because they ended up hitting part of the bus.
Yeah, it clipped off
It
one. I think it was. I don't know if it was the backside because Rudy says that he was. I think he said that had he been on the other side, he probably would have been struck
Right.
by the plane.
Right.
So he was like on the other side.
Right. So they were goofing off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were. The
Right,
guy
right.
was goofing off.
I think the guy I read that he had cocaine in his
Really?
system at the time. The one that was flying the plane. So
There you go.
And-
But the thing that Randy Rhoads feared the most, and he does it on a spur of the moment. Oh God! It was a big loss.
It
In the
was.
guitar world, it was a big loss, and he was one of those clean guys.
Mhm.
He was one of those clean guys. He didn't drink a lot. He didn't do any of that kind of stuff. He wasn't into the cocaine thing a lot or anything
Right.
like that. He was a clean guy, and that's how he's bringing Ozzy out of that world.
And even Ozzy said when they were partying and stuff, he would always be seeking out at whatever town they were in. He would always seek out local teachers and stuff like that
Right.
to get more guitar
Right.
lessons. 'Cause
Exactly. He was on the right track.
that's what he was into. And even Ozzy said it before. He was planning on leaving the band. He
Right.
wasn't going to do that forever.
Right.
So it was.
He was the real thing.
He was and he inspired just a lot of guitarists.
He did.
From Dimebag Darrell, another tragedy.
Right.
It just happened like 10 years ago.
Right. I don't know what was that.
He's the guitar player from Pantera, the
Okay.
one that got shot on stage.
I didn't.
I don't know if you remember that.
What happened?
It was at the time, I think Pantera had split up already about 2 years. And him and his brother, Vinnie Paul, formed this new band
Okay.
called Damage Plan.
Okay.
And they had put out a new record and they were going to promote that new record. They're playing out in this club, I believe it was in Ohio.
Mm.
And I think by the first song, this guy just rushes the stage with a gun and just starts shooting. I think he shoots Dimebag shot him in the back maybe like 3 or 4 times. Just killed him instantly.
Jesus.
And he held a couple people hostage.
Mhm.
And
Oh, really?
Yeah. And luckily a cop in the area was working undercover, I think, off duty. I forget
Mhm.
what it was. He picked up the call, comes in, he knows what's happening. He
Mhm.
heard it on the radio. He comes in with a shotgun. He goes behind I guess it's like where the drummer's at and
Mhm.
everything, goes behind, sees the guy, points the shotgun, and just shoots him right in the head.
Okay.
Clean. But it was very unfortunate because Dimebag's he was another player like Randy
Right.
Eddie Van Halen who
Right.
he was just a really good guy,
Right.
He would always get up there and jam with the people that they were on tour with, whether it was they were more into like heavy metal and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that, but he would always get up and jam with the guys from Poison or
Right.
to the people in Slayer, but everywhere he went, just people said nice things
He
about
was
him.
a good guy.
He was a really good guy. Of course, he got hammered every now and then.
Right.
But he would wake up the next day and he'd be like nothing happened.
Right. He stayed on the.
He stayed on the right track, and
Right.
it's just a shame that people like him get taken away
know,
like that.
I know. What is that line? Only the good die young. So
Right. And what's ironic is that he died doing what he loved.
Right.
He died on stage.
Right.
Playing guitar.
Right.
And who would have ever thought that he would end up being buried in a Kiss casket. He got buried in a Kiss casket.
Oh, really?
A band that he idolized
Right.
growing up, and I think it was Eddie Van Halen. He put his guitar. What album was it? I don't know if you've seen the back of Van Halen 2. He has that yellow and black guitar.
Right.
He actually put that inside the casket.
Is that right?
Before they buried him.
Okay. Yeah, I have seen that yellow and black guitar.
Yeah, so he actually put that one in there before
I'll
they
be darned.
buried him. So, I mean, who would ever thought?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
would you ever think that would happen?
Yeah, exactly. The respect thing was.
It's just, and he even had a tattoo of Ace Frehley, the guitar player from
Right.
Kiss, on his chest. You know,
Okay.
he always said, if it had been for Ace, you know, there would be no Dimebags.
Right.
And it's just amazing. He put out some really good stuff.
That's great. But
Whether it floats anybody's boat or not, but I'm a huge fan of Pantera.
Yeah. But that's sad that you never know.
You never know, so you just got to keep plowing ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we wrap up here,
Okay.
just got a couple more
You bet.
questions I want to cover. Do you remember the first, whether that be single or record that you purchased?
Well, let me think.
As far back as you can remember. I mean, I can tell you mine. It's pretty easy. The first CD I got maybe was, I think, that I purchased on my own was Journey's Greatest Hits.
Okay.
But I can go way back to listening to my dad's cassettes, whether that be Black Sabbath, even as far back as maybe the Animals or Van
Right.
Halen, all that early stuff.
Well, you see, when I would have done that, it would have been. It wasn't when I was in Mexico. I didn't buy any records when I was there, but it was still vinyl. And back in those days, you bought either an album, and back then it was the Beatles, or the Stones were coming out with albums. So when I got back, I was with bands pretty quick. So either I went with somebody to go buy a 45, because you bought and in the 45 you had the A side and the B side.
B-side, right.
And sometimes we would learn the A side and the B side. You know, so the first ones would have been something that I would have actually learned. You know, so but it would have been either the Beatles or the Stones or something like that. But I don't remember which one.
Okay.
Which one? But I remember when I bought guitar strings was at a drugstore around the corner from my house.
Jeez.
And you would break a string on your guitar and you could go buy singles at the drugstore.
Ooh.
And you could buy aspirin and a guitar string. you know. So, but I remember reading a thing. An article that B.B. King. I want to mention this because I remember reading an article with B.B. King about how poor they were when they were kids. They said we were so poor that when we would break a guitar string, we would save the parts that broke. Like if the guitar string broke closer to the tuning pegs, you saved the part that was left of the tuning peg, and you saved the other part, and you made a square knot. You made a square knot over by the tuning peg, connecting both the strings, and a square knot in Boy Scout. The Boy Scouts, they always told you that will hold anything. So I did when I read that, I did the same thing, and because it was a square knot, and we didn't have enough money, and it was like 10 cents for a guitar string, but we didn't have enough money to buy a guitar string.
Right.
So we would,
back then, I mean, 10 cents goes a long way.
oh yeah, back then 10 cents was a lot. 10 cents was a lot. So when you found a dime, it was a big deal.
Like
Big deal. If you found a quarter, you were rich.
Lucky day.
You were rich. So the point I was trying to make is we would make a square knot to tie the guitar string together to hold it for another 3 months.
Jeez.
And it would work.
Wow.
It would hold most of the time. So we used to do that. B.B. King did that too.
It's amazing that you can pick up. I've read somewhere on guitar strings that Eddie Van Halen put out saying that whenever he would buy a fresh pair of strings, he would boil them before he put them on.
Yeah.
What was the whole reason? What's the whole reason behind that?
Well, what I thought about, and I did that also. I boiled them after I had used them for a long time. And the reasoning behind that, now Eddie, I don't know if he boiled them before he put them on, but I would think that he would have boiled them after he had them on after a while. The reason why is that when you have guitar strings on for a while and you still are not making a lot of money before you're rich, you develop grime and oils and stuff to retain the tonality of that string. You want to keep it as clean as possible, so you wipe it out after you wipe it with a rag every time you play. But if you don't get to do that, if you're playing all the time, you don't get to wipe them out. So you take them off and you boil them, and you boil all that grime and oil off.
Okay.
So extending the life for another 3-4 months.
Oh, okay. I used to think
takes
it was,
all the dirt and all the grime comes off of it.
Okay, I always used to think it was for some sort of effect or.
No, it's just to make it last a little bit
Like,
longer.
I'm gonna boil my strings. Maybe it'll sound different.
No.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first guitar that you purchased or that they bought for you?
Yes, and it was at the local Baytown music store, and the music store was on Texas Avenue, and it was called Halbert's. There's a guy named Halbert owned it, and that was one of 2 music stores in Baytown,
Right.
and mom and pop music stores, not like Guitar Center or anything like that. So, and I would have been about like. Other than that, I had been in bands, but I was using everybody else's stuff because I didn't own one. So, but when I owned my first one, my brother worked washing pots and pans. My brother Porfirio, he passed away already.
Right.
But he worked his buns off, and both him and I were into music together, And I wanted to bring him along with me, but he just didn't practice as much, and he didn't have the gift to do it.
Right.
It didn't come easier to him,
I guess he was more. I mean, the time that I knew him, he was more. He appreciated it.
Oh
more.
yes, no doubt.
Every time we went to his house, he always made us feel welcome.
Yes.
He was always showing me his record collection.
Yes.
Like, check this out.
Yes.
He put it on stuff.
Since we were kids, we were like that together. We were into music big time. We would go and try to get into clubs that we were too young to get into. We would sneak into them, and we did. We were successful most of the time in getting in. We'd help. The guys would come in to set up at the local clubs and in Baytown, and they would be bringing in their gear, and we'd say, "Can we help you guys?" Yeah. Well, we can't get in, but here, take my guitar and take my amp. And
I'm a roadie.
My brother and I would be helping them all that, and then when we'd bring the stuff in, we'd just kind of sit down, and we'd kind of act like, well, we belong here.
Somebody would come and you'd be like, okay, put this over here.
Exactly. Make it look like you belong.
All right, just kind of bring that down a little bit.
Exactly. And so my brother Furio was totally into that as much as I was. So yeah, from since we were kids. So yeah, Furio was like that. He's a wonderful person. How did we get him? He was the one actually put the down payment on them at the local store. He put a bass down and a guitar on layaway. So it took us like almost a year to get them out. But he put in a little bit of money. I'd put in whatever I had. Whenever we got money, that was our primary thing. We put $10 here, $5 here until we got them out. And it was, it was a brand called Apollo. And it was a bass that looked like Paul McCartney's bass.
Right.
Like the violin.
Right.
And but only it was the cheaper kind, Apollo. His is a Hofner. That's the real thing. But and mine was looked like a Strat. It had like 4 pickups, fancy looking. So those were our first guitars.
Wow.
Electrics.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it was really neat. It was wonderful to have them. Actually, Mom has pictures of both Furio and I holding them like that when we were like 16.
Wow.
15, 16.
Wow.
And one day you'll come over and I'll tell
Oh,
Mom
for
to
sure,
pull
for
them
sure.
out. So,
You rarely hear that. I rarely hear that nowadays. I usually hear that a lot with people from previous generations working working towards that, whether
yes,
it be buying your first guitar
right,
or your first car.
right,
Some people nowadays, I've seen it myself. They just get handed things, and it's
yes,
like, you know, what are you, what are you learning there?
right,
You're not learning. You got to get out there.
right. And, you
I
know,
mean, not to say that. I mean, of course, I've had things handed down to me, but
sure,
it's taken time. I mean, I
yeah,
didn't start driving until. I mean, I took the metro for my first 2 years of college,
right.
and the metro rail. I didn't even have my own car until I was maybe. How old was I? Maybe 21, maybe
21.
20 at the
So,
most.
so you appreciated whenever you got that car.
Oh yeah, and I still have it.
See, exactly. So that's the whole thing. Is your level of appreciation is totally different.
Because I'm sure, like yourself, I mean, you see people when you were in high school, when I was in high school, driving around in the Camaro or a fancy car, whatever it may be, and he would just look at him and be like, okay,
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
You know, I'm taking the bus,
Well,
whatever.
you know, that's funny that you say that because there was a truck that my dad would. We were living at home, and I was already dating. And
Your dad was just to mention, your dad was great.
I know he was an
Great,
awesome
man.
guy, man,
Great.
and he was just an awesome. He'd give you the shirt off
hilarious.
his back. Yeah, he's hilarious. He's a beautiful man. Loved him with all my heart. And he had a little truck at one time that was so old. It was the paint had fallen off of it. And it had a stick shift that we had put a golf ball on because the ball had fallen off, and it was just a rod that went to the floor. The floor had already was falling. The floor was already rotting out. You could bear, and it was a stick shift, and the passenger side door, and this was a truck, one of them old trucks that you see in those old movies, the farm that's just old.
Right.
Well, that was the truck that they would give me to go on a date. And I would take these girls, and these girls were like the cheerleaders, and I would take them in my truck, and the door, I would have a rope tying the door to this side over here because there would be times when the door would just fly open when I took a left turn,
God.
and the cheerleader would have to hang on to me, but they still came with me. You know what I mean?
All right, honey, hang on tight.
Exactly. That's what we had, you know. So by the time we got a new car, we never got a new car. We always nothing was ever handed to us. It was just something you had to work towards. In answer to your question about working towards something, we had to work for our guitars. You know, we had to work for everything. So you appreciate it at a much higher level.
Yeah, because you see people all the time that, like, in my high school, even in college,
Who had
driving
everything.
these, year models and stuff
yep.
like that. And there are some people that can afford it.
Yes.
And then there's the other half that, that there's no way that.
Right. Oh yeah. They're not going. They're
Right,
not.
right. There's no way you bought that yourself.
No.
I know your dad paid for it. but-
Yeah, and also kids that have gotten stuff that I knew that didn't appreciate it.
Exactly.
I knew kids like that were given stuff, and man, they ended up being troubled kids who got handed almost everything, and they didn't appreciate it.
Right, right. It's
And
like,
it's too bad.
I'll just buy a new car. Well,
Right.
to me it doesn't work that way. 'Cause,
No.
I mean, I take really good care of the car I have now. I've had
Right.
it for since my dad got it, maybe 10 years already.
Right.
But you
You
gotta maintain it.
Right.
You gotta.
Exactly.
It's not cheap.
No, no.
So if you go
and-
out and buy a new car, it's.
Yeah, you appreciate it and you take care of it. Yeah,
Right, right.
certainly, man. Yeah. So that's the difference. Not everybody's like that.
Right,
you know,
right.
But some people that get handed stuff
Mm,
don't appreciate it.
right, right.
Some do,
Right.
but you know,
It goes with everything: cars, even clothing.
Exactly.
You see people wearing stuff that's like.
exactly.
I'm like, if you're trying to impress somebody, or
Right.
I mean, that's all on them.
Right.
But, whatever.
A certain watch, a certain
Yeah,
jewelry,
exactly.
and you go,
Hmm.
you didn't get that.
Right, right, and even with phones nowadays, I
Yeah,
gotta get the new phone. Or
you're right.
with these companies like Apple putting out phones like
Oh,
to get people buying.
right.
I'm still on on not this new one, but I'm still on the last one on the iPhone 5. I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
I've been thinking of upgrading to the new one just because
Right.
it's new, but then I'm like, well,
Why?
this one still works pretty
Yeah,
good,
this one's
and
still doing it for me.
it does everything that I guess the new one would do. What would the new one?
Right.
What's different?
Yeah,
What's the
why am I
difference?
going to pay that extra
Yeah.
$300-$400?
It's insane, and
Yeah.
that's as much as I paid for this one I have now.
Right.
So,
Right.
and it's like, well, I guess I look at it now as kind of like getting a new car or something. It's like,
Right.
why would I get a new car each time a new model comes out?
Exactly.
It takes
Yeah.
me from A to B. So
Right.
why would I get a new phone?
Those are the questions you have to ask yourself, and you should.
It's like, why would I get a new phone if I can call from this one? I can
Right.
get messages. So
I
service
get
is
on the
same.
web with this
Yeah.
one. So what's
What's the difference? Oh, it has a better camera. Well,
how much am I using that camera? Am I on the Mars that I need that many pixels
Right.
or what?
oh, it has faster internet. Well,
How much faster?
fast internet now?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, it's you can put this many songs. Well, how much music am I going to be listening to
Right.
throughout the day? I got a job.
Exactly, exactly. And if I want to put more songs on the one I have now, I can delete a few here that I don't listen to. Yeah, yeah.
It's something that I've never really thought of before
Mhm.
because I was much younger. Obviously, I was very naive.
Yeah.
This and that.
All of us are, of course.
But as you grow up, you can take into consideration these things, and it's not because my dad just wants to tell me things, but he's telling them for a reason
Well, yeah,
because he's been through all that.
it's a good thing to be told that because
right.
that's them imparting this knowledge
Mhm.
that you're going to have.
Right, and he tells me all the time, whether it's with financial stuff,
Right.
mainly financial stuff, 'cause
Right.
that's very important.
Right?
He's like, when you decide to get married and have a kid, you're on your own, buddy.
Yep.
There's no coming back saying, "Oh, mom and dad."
No.
You're on your own, man.
And think about how hard it is. Now multiply it times 100.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Think about how hard it would be.
Mhm.
Multiply it 100.
Mhm.
More harder than you can even imagine. So,
because everything that, like he tells me, everything that you like doing and this and that, once you have a kid, that's out the window.
it
It's-
becomes in the back.
Yeah, forget that you haven't gotten sleep or that you're sick.
Or are doing these projects, or
This
doing
and that.
this.
You're getting out late from work.
Exactly.
You're-
Or you're spending this on a meal that you want to eat.
Mhm. No.
All of it.
Right. That's all goes to
Yeah.
the child.
Very important, man. Those, if you can learn those at the earliest age possible, like for you, you're at that
Mhm.
prime age. One of the things I try to tell people your age
Mhm.
in the 20s
Right.
is you're living your best years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's hard to know what that means when you're living them.
Oh yeah.
And when somebody tells you, it's hard to figure out, well, what do you mean? I'm just telling you, these
Mhm.
are your best years, meaning you're at your best physically.
Mm-hmm.
You're apt to do the best work right now.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I don't mean that you're not going to be able to do it later on in
Mhm.
life, but
But it's very important that you have the foundation.
the most important
Going
you're
in.
when you're my age and you get up and you hurt here and you hurt there and you go, God, I remember not hurting. Back when I was in my 20s.
Mm.
Now, if somebody would have told me that, would I have appreciated it? I don't know.
Right. I
You
used,
know?
I used to lift this much weights.
Exactly.
Now I can't lift this much.
Exactly. So, yeah, you're going about it the right way.
Mhm.
Appreciate these times right now and do the most you can
Right.
to advance yourself, to learn the most.
Mm-hmm.
For another probably 15 years, you've
Mhm.
got another good 15 years.
Right.
Before things really start hitting where,
And they're gonna hit hard.
and they're going to hit hard. So to get the most done right now,
Mhm.
don't make responsibilities like kids and marriage
Right.
too
And
soon.
that's the thing that my dad tells me a lot. He says there's gonna come a time where it's gonna get hard, but you're not gonna struggle as much as
Right.
other people that have kids at such a young age.
Yes.
I know a friend of mine that just graduated college.
Mhm.
He has a baby already. I'm like, man, that's.
Can you imagine?
I mean, good for him that he graduated.
Yes.
Good for him, because
Lucky for him.
I know a lot of people that have dropped out or didn't even go to college.
Most of the ones that are at a young age having kids don't graduate from
Right,
college.
right.
Most of them, because everything is out the window.
Mhm.
Now it's time to go to work.
Mhm.
The plant, wherever.
Yeah.
Your life is almost over.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they do say, and I agree with this, is when you have a child, that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not you, not her, not anything else, not what you want to eat, not where you want to go, not how late you stay up, not where you want to. That's the most important thing.
And that's where a lot of problems come with couples,
Right.
because, like you said, these are your best years. They want to keep living those
Yes.
best years, but it's not.
They're not able to anymore.
You can't
and
do that
It's a
anymore.
psychological strain.
You had your chance.
And you'll end up fighting.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've seen it all the time. I mean,
Me too.
People going to clubs and this and that, and I'm like, not that it's none of my business, but don't you have a kid to take care of?
Yeah.
It's like you're out clubbing.
Right.
You just
Not good.
send it off to the mother or
Right.
father, wherever.
Not good.
It's like,
Not good.
where are your responsibilities? I
Yeah.
mean, you're an adult now. I mean, you're considered an adult, I guess.
You are.
So-
You are.
So-
At that point, you're responsible for that. You shouldn't be out there.
Right. And like you said, it's a psychological thing where, you're supposed, and my dad tells me all the time, enjoy this while you can.
Yes.
Because you're not gonna
You're not
get
this.
it again. And up until now that I'm on my way out to graduating,
Right.
I've been able to look back and see all the freedom that I've had.
Right.
I'm like, man, this is fun.
Right.
This has been fun.
Yes.
And now I'm at the point where I'm transitioning to actually having a job and
Right.
this and that. But it's like it's been a lot of fun.
But you know what? Stay single and stay without any children,
yeah.
and you'll be able to get a lot more done.
Right.
And have a lot of wonderful things happen you without the stress.
Right. And if you're for people that are in a relationship or whatever, be able to, like we were talking about before, respect each other's career paths. Like,
Right.
I'm on my way to doing something, and I know my girl's on her way to doing something.
Exactly.
So that's the way it should
Don't
be.
put the stress on each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's we have so much already on our
Right.
plate. So
Right.
to add something like a child into the mix or
Right.
marriage, it's
Right.
just you're just adding more fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And that's big time fuel.
And you never had children
No,
yourself.
Never did. So I didn't have that strain.
Was this more of a personal choice, or was it more because of your career?
No, it wasn't necessarily because of my career, but it was a personal choice that I made because I knew the strain. Relationship was a strain anyway. Like when I first got married and all that, that was a big strain and psychological strain. But I made it. I was always wise to the idea: don't have a child, because I'm not sure if this is the person I want to end up with.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you have a child with that person, if you down the road, y'all don't look at things eye to eye, man, they can use that child, and I see it all the time. You see it in the news. You see it with actresses and actors doing this stuff, and you see it, and now who used to be friends and everything, now they're using this child. I knew that I didn't want any part of that.
Right.
So I was able to get out of the relationship if it didn't work out without that.
On good terms.
Yeah,
obviously.
on good terms, and also without having the child suffer, or one of us using the child as a manipulating thing for our own, negative reasons.
Right, right, and there's no
We-
need for that.
With no need, so I never put myself in that
Mm-hmm.
situation.
No, and you're bonded to that person whether you hate him or not.
Exactly.
Like, for the rest of your life. pretty
Exactly.
much. So
Exactly.
it's not. To me, that's not a good life.
No, it's not.
Not a good
It's
life.
not. So, don't do it.
No, don't do it. Wait it out, and then
One day you'll.
and then there's my dad says, look, there'll be plenty of time for
Exactly.
that. So
There will.
don't rush things, and you're on the. I mean, even himself, he didn't get married until he was maybe 27,
Right.
around there, 28.
Right.
So it's still young, but
Yeah,
more.
But he waited a little bit.
But he waited. I mean, he already had his education under his
Right.
belt,
Right.
graduating with an electrical engineering degree.
Right.
Even then, took him about 17 years to get the job he I guess you would say dream job.
Right.
That he wanted in the first
Right.
place.
Was working for.
with the degree.
Right.
Because it took him that long, in coming from Mexico,
Right.
doing the hard labor,
Right.
having to learn English,
Right. All that hard stuff.
having to become certified in all these things, while having two kids at the same, not one kid, but two kids.
Exactly. That's a lot.
And I look back and I'm like, man, like
That's quite a man.
you were like on it.
Yeah, that's quite a
And
man.
as much as we can go back and forth, father, son, whatever.
Of course.
But it's like, man, you did all these things.
Yeah.
To this day, he's like, no, he's still getting out there.
Yeah, well, of course.
9 to 5, whatever it may be.
That's good.
But
That's good.
it's you could say that I've learned everything from him.
Yeah.
And other people, of course,
Right.
like yourself
Right.
and other people I look up to, but
But
he's like the
he's
number
the
one.
number one, of course.
Number one.
Of course.
And he's always going to be. So
Yeah, of course
if I
he
look
is.
for advice.
And he's been good, so
Oh yeah, none of that. No.
it's wonderful.
It's always, and it comes from his father, and
Right.
it comes from there. So.
Right. The wisdom.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he always stressed education on me because, and it's something that I also talked about when I was doing my internship at juvenile probation over here at by Chimney Rock
Right.
last summer. There's this African American guy working there, and he asked me, "What would you be doing if you weren't doing the college thing or whatever?"
Right.
And I thought about it. I'm like, I'd probably be out doing construction or
Right.
something of that nature.
Right.
And he's all like, you know what? I'd probably be doing the whole plant thing myself, out in Detroit or whatever.
Right.
Because as minorities, we need that education.
Right.
Otherwise, we have
Right.
nothing else.
You're at the plant.
You're at the plant, or
and
you're,
I mean, at the low end of the totem pole,
and my dad tells me all the time, all the stories, I did it, and
Right.
it's not. I would never want that for
Right.
you. It's.
He's right.
He's
He's
like,
right.
I would go to sleep with my back just feel like it's being torn apart,
I believe it.
and have to get up the next day. I'm sure you had your share of
Yep.
jobs here and there.
Yep.
And it's like, man.
Yeah, it's nothing you want to do, They bust their ass to do that
Mhm.
for you,
Mhm.
so.
And you have kids nowadays, not respecting that. I respect that a lot.
Yeah.
When people, we were talking about at the beginning when we started this, what it took to you see, like you said, kids hauling milk and this before
Right.
they started school. And,
Exactly.
having to save up to buy that first guitar
Exactly.
or that first car.
And take a long time to get it,
And then things get in the way. You get sick or this and that. And
Right?
It's just, before we close out,
Okay.
I know the story that you had gone in an accident when you were younger. My dad tells me that story all the time, that he would
Yeah.
come visit you guys, and you would be in bed
Right. Right.
because of an accident that you suffered
Yes.
when you were much younger. Was
Yeah,
this a car accident?
It was a car accident. And it was during the hippie days,
Mhm.
and I was about 17, 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And those were and what we had done, myself and another guy from Baytown, had decided to go to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
We're crazy. We're teens. We don't know what we're doing.
Right.
But it's the hippie days, and we stick our thumbs out and hitchhike to Mexico. Okay.
Wow.
But on the way there, Corpus Christi,
Uh-huh.
and we're kind of staying at we're living the hard life. We're kind of staying in parks. We had backpacks. We had stuff to sleep on, basically. But we didn't have hardly any money. We didn't know what we were doing. So we were hitchhiking to a place in Corpus Christi called Cole Park, and it was by the water, downtown by the water, because Corpus Christi is right by the water. And we got picked up by this couple, and they were in one of those Volkswagen Beetle bugs, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were placed in the back, myself and this guy, and it was this guy driving and this girl that he had, and they took off. And we were almost to where we were, our destination. And the guy that was driving so crazy. He was doing donuts on the road, you know.
Gosh.
And we were scared, and we were telling him, "Drop us off, pull over, drop us off," because we were scared.
Right, right.
Because this guy we figured out he was drunk. We didn't drink. We didn't do any of that stuff. We didn't know but we could tell he was nuts, you know. And I just figured he's drunk.
You were like,
know?
this is it, right?
And
here.
so he's got this girl over here. He's driving, and so he said, "No, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it." And I could see our destination. We were on the road that took us to that park, park, and he just started to pick up speed. I think he was going like 60, 70 miles an hour, and we're going down this road, and I happened to look up and at the street, and we're coming into a curve, you know, where the street goes like this and then it curves.
Right.
And right at the curve, you could see that the sprinklers had wet that whole section.
Oh,
we're not going to make it. I know we're not going to make it. No matter what, we're not going to make it. We're going too fast. Even if he starts braking right now, we're going to go by that. He's not going to make the curve, plus it's wet.
Jeez.
So, sure enough, my buddy and I, we looked at each other at the same time, and when we looked over, the car just started going zzz, and we started hitting cars. Boom.
Oh, man.
Boom, boom. And every time the car hit, we were hitting each other. We were hitting the top. We were in a massive wreck before, and it seemed like it took an eternity for
Really?
it to stop. You know what I mean? Because every time we hit, we were getting banged up against each other
God.
and against the metal and all that. And when it stopped, I was the only one that was awake. But you know, like if somebody were to hit you in the head with a shovel, you know that ringing and that pain you would feel.
Right.
You can't hear hardly anything. You're just like, and I was looking, and the doors were open,
Jeez.
and I looked down like this, and I didn't see my leg. Well, I looked back, and my leg was back here.
Oh, God.
I was sitting like this, like you are right now.
Right,
but when I
right.
looked over here, my foot was looking at me like this, and I was like, "Oh shit," you know. No,
It's not good.
not good. So I kept passing out, and I was in enormous pain, and nobody was in the front, and my guy next to me was out. He was out.
So they were pretty much thrown out.
They was thrown out.
Jeez.
And the girl was killed.
Oh, God.
And I don't know what happened to him, but she was killed. He was gone. And myself and this guy got sent to the same hospital. And I remember them taking me out of the car, out of that bug, because they had to really get in there to get me, and it hurt so bad. And I had what ended up happening was my leg in the middle of it had been broken completely. Okay, and my pelvis from this part had been broken completely enough to turn my leg around. You know,
Jeez.
so it had broken like this and placed back here like that. So my pelvis was, part of it was back here, and part of it was over here, and I was like this. I'm like, oh man, this is not good. So what ended up happening was I had a body cast for like 3 months or 4 months, and that, you know, the body cast up you from here
Right.
down to your feet, you know, and and I had pins and plates in my leg and my pelvis and everything. So I was in bad shape for several years, you know. But I practiced a lot, even when
yeah.
I was like that.
Yeah, my dad tells me all the time. He's like, he suffered the accident. You suffered the accident, but that didn't take away the fact that I'm still gonna play guitar. I still
Yeah.
got my hands.
Yeah.
So
And I did. I've had them place the guitar around me, and they would leave it on there, and I would practice for hours and hours. Everybody would go do their thing, which I couldn't do, but I would practice for hours.
And it just goes on to show you that you, from the very beginning, you've loved what you
Yeah,
what you do.
I did. By no mistake. I really loved what I was doing, and I really cared about it.
You're like, hey, I can't walk,
But I could play.
still play. You
Yeah.
can take my legs off. I can still
Exactly,
play.
I could still play. So I really loved it from the beginning.
Right. Not even an accident like that can stop you.
No, not if you care
Didn't
about
stop
it
you.
like that. So,
Jeez.
so if you care about something like that, you're gonna keep doing it.
That's a very interesting, terrifying story.
Yeah,
But I mean, for anybody that's ever been involved in an accident
Right.
like that,
but I managed to come out of it. So,
yeah, you hear a lot of people that it sticks with them for a long time.
Right.
Psychologically, and
Right.
mentally.
Not me. It didn't do that to me. Because after I started getting better, I started exercising more and more. I still have the scars from the top all the way down to the bottom to my knee. Big old scar, that much going all the way up like that. And
Any aches or pains from that?
just normal aches and pains from aging, and that's it.
Nothing like
it didn't end up crippling me or anything. The guy that was traveling with me, it did. He walks with a limp,
Wow.
so it did do that to him,
Wow.
but it didn't do it to me.
So it was like nothing happened to you.
Right.
In a way.
Right.
'Cause, I
The
mean, you're
doctor I had put, there was 12 pins and plates on my leg and 3 pins here connecting my pelvis together, 3 big old pins like that.
Oh.
And they were in there for a couple of years, and they went back and operated on me and took them out. Then the bone grew back inside, so everything came out perfect.
Wow. And this was years ago, before you see all the advancements now with
None of that.
with technology.
It had to be a
amazing.
good doctor, somebody who just knew what he was doing.
Wow.
And basic splints, basic screws and plates, basic screws, and that's it. And hopefully it'll. But I was young, and so I was still growing calcium and all
okay.
that. So as long as I took care of myself, it grew back right.
Wow. One more thing I want
Yes.
to cover. I keep saying every time
That's
we have
okay.
conversations like this, I keep saying, "Oh, we're gonna wrap this up." But
That's okay.
That's the thing about the whole podcasting. We're not limited for
Right.
time, and
Right.
so we decide as much as. It's not like radio where you have to play this song or you can't say this or that. But
Right. Okay.
None of that stuff.
Okay, cool.
I mentioned that book I was reading before by Mark Ferrari, the professional musician,
Right.
where he talks a lot about the business side of things.
Right.
And it's a lot about what we've been talking about, the whole creative side of it. What advice would you give up-and-coming musicians that are considering a professional career in music, whether that be guitar playing or drumming or just a career in music in general, and what to look for as far as the business end of it goes, based on your experience?
Well, I know that the way I would approach it now, and if I had to impart some knowledge on it, I would say there's several aspects of it. One of them is, depending on the instrument that you want to play, practice. First of all, practice many hours doing that. Okay, and devote yourself to it. If you decide this is what you want to do, okay. The business end of it. Now there's so many courses, and I would recommend in college going in and looking at all the courses that have to do with the study of the music that you're studying.
Going into theory.
The theory, all that.
Stuff like that.
Make yourself well versed in all of that. Because nowadays, even your regular rock guitarists are awesome at that too.
Wow.
So the competition has grown with the really good guys, the professionals now. Go out to be a professional. Also the industry, as far as the business end of it, study it. There's courses in college having to do with the business end of it. So I would say take an equal amount of business and music theory and all that also.
Because a lot of people, some people, not a lot of people, I would say some people fall under that delusion of, hey, I'm just going to form a band and this and that. Well, there's more to it. And then, like you said, with playing and learning, there's more to it.
Exactly.
Then there's more.
Yeah.
There's more.
And do your dream, form a band and everything, but be smart about it and look at studying the guys that you admire that are doing it professionally now.
And they're still around to this day.
Exactly. What are they doing?
Yeah, well, what have they done that, Kiss, they're still around. Well, what have they done to stay consistent?
Exactly.
Simmons always talks about it all the time. We have 3,000 licenses for the band, branding the band.
Right.
Not just, here's a couple of, here's our next album.
Right.
No, he's always looking out at, what else can we do for the band?
Oh, yeah. Certainly.
As far as not just T-shirts, but caskets. And
you name it. Anything like that.
And it all comes down to their core values. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, you look at them, never did drugs.
Right.
Never got drunk or high.
Right.
Always made sure that everything was taken care of. And every now and then they had a couple of shady people here and there. They were handling their money.
Right.
But it got to the point where it was like, you know what, we gotta take care of all of this ourselves. Right. Because, we're building an empire.
Right.
And it can quickly go from empire to...
And your empire could end up being somebody else's empire. Yeah. They can take it away from you if you don't watch it. The signing of the papers, every paper, before you sign on the dotted line, know what you're signing,
I heard a drummer say the other day in an interview, they asked him for advice too, and he said, first, the only thing he said was, learn how to read a contract.
Right.
Because once you sign on the dotted line,
exactly,
it's over, man.
Exactly. Learn how to read a contract. That's another one. So before you start signing pieces of paper, don't sign anything. If you don't understand it, don't sign it. So.
And Mark Ferrari talks a lot in the book about publishing and road managers. It goes into a lot. I read it over the holidays. It's very detailed.
Right.
And like yourself, he mentions what he does now is a lot of session work and scores and this and that. So he has income coming from all types of
multiple sources, yes.
Not just one source, because the band, that band Keel, they disbanded maybe, I think, in the early 90s.
Right.
And they'll reform every now and then. But
right.
If you're just doing that and that's your only form of income, then
right.
If
you're not doing anything.
2015, it's not 1986 anymore.
Exactly.
You may have sold millions of albums before, but that was before.
That was gone. That's gone.
That's it. That's gone. Whether you spend it or not, but that's gone. Where's your next form of income?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It's
also, if one of the things I want to mention is if you're going to be a professional musician, one of the things you may want to look into also is the musicians' union.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Look into what that does for you and what that doesn't do for you, and that might work for you. Like the symphonic band, like the symphonies, they're required to join the union, because anytime somebody comes into like let's say a famous singer comes in, Tony Bennett comes into town, they're going to want to use the Houston Symphony, and maybe his band, his little band, but the Houston Symphony has the strings and all that. That to do his score for the concerts he's here for, 2 or 3 days, whatever, 2 days, and so they're going to read the score and they're going to get paid a percentage, so forth. So the musicians, you have to be in the union to play those gigs. Now, gigs like regular club gigs in Texas, it's a right to work state, and that means that you don't have to belong to the union. They can't get you gigs, and so a lot of musicians, that are just playing the clubs and who don't believe in all the other stuff you and I have been talking about, the business and they go, nah, man, I don't want to do any of that, man. I just want to just go hang out with my buds, go have a few beers and play, and just play rock and roll, man. I don't like that other stuff. And so they may not join the union because they say, man, the union can't get any gigs for you, Well, they're not supposed to, but I tell you what, they can give you can join their loan office, and you can get your first car through the union. Where other banks, will not give a musician a loan right away because you're a musician.
Right, right.
Yeah, you're not stable enough.
Mm-hmm.
The musicians union is owned by musicians. They're run by musicians, so they know your plight,
Wow.
and they'll give you a break first, and they'll work with you. They'll say maybe you can't do a payment here, but we'll work with you. Okay, do a small payment here and there to enable you to get your car and build your credit. So there's other things they can do for you. This is the business side of it.
Right, right.
So that's another thing I want to mention is the musicians union.
Instead of having the banks down your throat,
Close it on you.
Hey, we're picking up your car tomorrow because
Exactly.
you're past due.
The union will not do that. So they'll work with you, and so it's something you may want to look into also. Part of the business.
Yeah, I always before much younger, I always kind of thought about how a career in music would be like, and you also have to. I also tell people all the time, if they ask for advice, I tell them, you have to be realistic too as well.
Yes.
I'm all for doing whatever you want to do,
Right.
chasing your dreams and all that, but at the same time, you have to be very realistic.
Yes, you do.
As far as location goes, and the circumstances that you're in.
Right.
You can't just say, "Hey, I'm gonna be a musician," and you have a kid, or
Yeah.
you want to go out on the road like that.
No.
You have to be at home.
It's one of the hardest things to pursue.
Right.
is being
It's a hard
musician.
profession
It
at the
is
end of the day.
It's a hard profession. So, again, if you're going to do it, that means you have to love doing it.
love it.
That way you're willing to put up with that, but be smart about it. Learn everything you can about it. And nowadays there's all the courses you could possibly
Right.
want, and financial help you can get through that to get these courses. Get as many gigs and immerse yourself in as many gigs. Keep your mind open to every kind of music so that you can go do gigs of different kinds, so that you're always able to get this gig or that gig or this gig and support yourself while
Right,
you're pursuing
right.
your dream.
Right. And I see it a lot with musicians all the time. You see a musician like I'm trying to think of one here real quick. That they'll call up and be like, "Hey, you can get this guy to play or
Right.
this guy to play," and it's not just. You always hear about bands all the time. Musicians have their own side projects and stuff
Right.
like that. Some of it's just to, I guess, let off steam.
Right.
Do your own thing. Other times it's just, hey, I just want to do my own thing, my own solo thing, see how that
Right.
works out. I want to try out different styles of music.
Right.
But the band is still there.
Oh, yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah, leave all that open and keep your mind open and don't feel bad about it, about doing your own projects.
Right.
And doing that. And nobody should give you a hard time about that.
Right,
Hey, man,
right.
you're not devoted to our deal. You're pursuing your own thing. If somebody starts doing that trip on you, they're not looking out for you.
Right. That's another thing I wanted to mention that I forgot. Have you ever, in your career, have you ever had to deal with people that that you knew were going to become a problem as far as money goes and
A variety of things.
artistic differences?
Vision and yes,
Your vision?
yes.
Uh-huh.
I've had to eat my own vision in order to do somebody else's vision, and looking back, I shouldn't have done that. And at the time, I didn't have enough of my vision, or I thought I couldn't say no. Now I look back and go, yes, you can always say no, and don't feel bad about saying no.
Okay.
Always, if you don't feel like if it's cramping your style going in a certain direction at the time for you, don't do it. Unless if it's going to do something good for you.
Right.
It's going to get you somewhere, but. I've gotten into situations where I gave them all my time and devoted all my time and all that and didn't get anything out of it, and gave them everything out of it, And I said, man, I thought, well, I couldn't say no. Yeah, you can. You can say no and do say no. Now I've had guys tell me, man, let's do this band, man. I can't do that. I'm doing these projects right now, and that's what I want to do. Oh man, come on, this is gonna be hip. This is gonna be good. Come on. No.
It's going to be a hit.
No, I'm sorry. I can appreciate yours, but I'm sorry. So
I was watching this documentary the other day on the history of the Eagles. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. I highly recommend it.
Oh yeah,
for anybody out there.
That's a wonderful. I followed some of their history, so go ahead.
It's I mean, from when they first started,
Right.
up until they hit with Hotel California.
Right.
I mean, the magic was there, and then you run into situations like the whole business end of it, where you have people like Don Felder saying, the
Right.
guitar player saying, "Well, you know, I think I should be getting paid this much.
Right.
You know, how come you're earning this much?
Right.
I should be earning about the same. You know,
Right.
I wrote this song too."
Right.
And it's kind of like, well, you know, you got to also look at who's been there from the
Right.
very beginning, and
Right.
who's carried all the way.
Right.
Yeah, you wrote a really good hit and everything, but like Paul Stanley says from Kiss, there has to be somebody driving.
Right.
You know, you have your four wheels, but someone has to be driving
Exactly.
the car. And it's unfortunate what happened with them,
Right.
that they broke up.
Yeah,
You know?
and then that's when Joe Walsh came into the
Yeah,
picture.
exactly. And he kind of saw that as kind of like, you know, Joe Walsh, an amazing guitar player,
Yes,
one of
yes.
my favorites.
Right.
But you know, it's a clash of personality and
Right.
ego.
It was.
And you know, it never ends well in the
Yeah,
end.
and Felder ended up on the bad side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To this day.
To this day, and he's bitter about that.
To this day, and the Eagles are still out.
Oh, they're
selling out.
mega millions,
Selling out.
He
It's
should have
like-
just taken it easy,
Mhm.
They should have taken it easy.
And another band, a band like the Eagles, Kiss, same deal.
Right.
They got back together with the original lineup in '96,
Right.
and you know, just when you thought it was all said and done, the same problems started popping up again.
Right.
You know, Ace Frehley and Peter Criss,
Right.
back to drugs, back to alcohol,
Oh.
and it's like Paul Stanley mentions. Well, it's kind of like when you get together with an ex-girlfriend,
Hey.
you kind of find out why you broke up in the first
Right,
place.
right,
After
right.
going out again.
Right.
And it got to that point where it's kind of like, well, they started asking for equal share of the money and the
Right.
writing credits.
Right.
And it's like, well, at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for the band.
Exactly.
If you want to go do your own thing, hey, that's your own thing, man. Whatever.
Right.
But if you're in a band, it's tough. But for a band like Kiss that's established, and
Right.
it has been carried for 40 years by Paul Stanley,
Right.
by Gene Simmons, you know, they have most of the say.
Yeah.
And when they brought those Fraley and Chris back into the mix, they had a paid salary.
Right.
You know, they weren't paid equally.
Right.
So even then, I mean, what do you have to complain about? You were still getting paid good money.
Exactly.
It's-
The ego thing happened,
And
They-
I'm not sure how big of a Kiss fan you are. I'm a huge Kiss fan.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But again, it's that ego where, I mean, the four characters, they were larger than life, you know,
Right.
back in the 70s.
Right.
But for a reason, they were kicked out of the band. You know?
Right.
They said, hey, this guy's not showing up
Right.
to track these songs.
Right.
Or this guy's running late again for a show.
Right.
We can't depend on this guy
Right.
anymore. It got to the point where when they got back together in the late 90s, they had the guitar player that they have now, Tommy Thayer.
Right.
They had him ready to go in makeup and guitar. He was ready to go. He knew all the songs.
Right.
And at the last minute, you know, Fraley comes by and says, I'm here.
Right.
5 minutes late, but I'm here. So
Right.
it's you can't depend on people like
No,
that.
no, you can't. And it's ultimately it's business. At that point, it's business.
Mhm.
No hard feelings.
Oh, no. Not at
But it's a business at that point,
Yeah,
and it's working.
when you're dealing with that amount of money, you
Right.
know, somebody has to be held accountable.
You
for
better.
for
You better.
your actions.
You
One
better.
way or another, you know.
Exactly.
No drugs, no alcohol,
No.
none of that.
No.
And Stanley said when they got back together, everybody they had their own trainers, you know, because you had to be in shape.
Right.
It's not just getting out there and playing lead
Right.
guitar or whatever. You
Playing
gotta be
rock star. No.
running around, and you got to look the part. Man.
Yeah, you got to look the part. You got to be in shape.
You're in Kiss.
Right.
And it's a lot of people, I'd say about 10% of the fan base, they don't like what they do now because they have other members impersonating the makeup
guys.
and everything.
Right.
But they play better now than they ever have.
Right.
And they're still selling out arenas and stadiums. So
Hey, those people who are making fun of them, they can stay out.
and Stanley says that's just the 10%. The 90%, they still come out and
Exactly.
buy the
Support
CDs
and support the whole thing.
they still want, at the end of the day, they want to hear the hits.
Right.
Whether it's Detroit Rock City or
Right.
Love Gun, whatever
Right.
it may be. And it works with all bands. You
Right.
see it in all the bands.
Yeah.
The Eagles.
Yeah.
The Who.
They do. They want to hear the hits.
Black Sabbath.
Right.
And it's a shame when it has to come down to when you're arguing over money.
Right.
It's a shame.
And ego.
And ego as well. It's like,
you're getting paid more money than me, and you're still getting paid a lot.
right. If, like, let's say, for example, you, Heli, you're getting paid, let's say, $5 million to do a
Right.
reunion tour with me, whatever.
Right.
And I'm getting paid $2-3 million, whatever. A little less.
Right.
But by my standards, that's pretty.
By anybody's standards.
Anybody's standards, that's still high. Why should I make the case where it's like, how come you're getting
Yeah.
paid more than
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Exactly.
I write the same amount of songs. It's like, well, you just gotta look at your own
Yeah.
track record.
Exactly.
And
you may have been in the band longer, or you may be. You got to look at your own track record. That's
Mhm.
it. That's it.
Right, right.
But I've been in a band like that where some of us were getting paid more than guys that we were hiring,
Mhm.
and a guy that we hired, a drummer that we hired, thought he had only been in the band for like a year, but we had built the band up from nothing.
Mhm.
Invested in it with new PAs and gotten it from a small little band to where we were making top dollar playing private parties, and then we hired a drummer that we had played with before, and in a year he wanted equal pay, but he was getting paid a lot of money already. We were paying him. We were making sure he was getting paid. All the guys were getting, but 4 of us were getting a big chunk, but we had spent all the money building it up, and we had spent all the time doing it, years doing it, and he couldn't see it. And what happened was we ended up having to let him go, and he was bitter over that. So he never saw it was an ego thing.
So it's like if I were to come into your band right now and within a year I'm like, hey,
Right.
I want
We
this
built it
much.
up over 8 years.
Uh-huh.
You come in over 1 year and say, I want equal pay.
That's gonna rub you the wrong way.
Although you're getting paid, you're walking away with $500 a night.
Right. You're taken care of. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm getting paid more, but
Right,
you're
right.
getting paid $500. You're still getting paid a lot of money. So really, just take it easy, So, but it does kill a lot of bands.
Oh, it does, and big bands
Yeah,
too.
big bands. It
Big
happens.
bands. This last tour that Black Sabbath were on, they were only on. They had Ozzy's drummer.
Right.
They didn't have the original drummer on there.
Okay.
And it all came down to the same thing.
Same thing.
He was under the impression that everybody was gonna have equal pay,
All right.
and at the end of the day, it didn't come out to that. So lawyers got involved,
Right.
this and that. Talk to my lawyer. It's like,
Right.
dude, if you can't just sit down and come to sort of agreement, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the fans.
Right.
You can't lose sight of that.
Right. No.
I hear that a lot from the KISS guys. At the end of the day, it's the fans that built us,
Right.
built these characters, this band.
Right.
Because of them, I wouldn't be,
Right.
Gene Simmons.
Exactly.
Or I wouldn't be a guy like Van Halen, Eddie
Right.
Van Halen, or
Exactly.
Metallica, who are
Exactly.
still out there, just
Yeah,
to this day.
right. You've got the fans are the ones that made you. Both of you together.
And
you
they
know,
can
so-
break you.
Yeah, it can break
easily.
you too. Right.
Easily. When you lose sight of, when you start looking at things like money and this and that, it's
Ego and all that.
It's like, all right, dude, you're not in it for
Right.
for the band.
Right.
I always look at. I was reading this book by the bassist from Megadeth,
Right.
David Ellefson.
Right.
He's well-known musician in his circles. He always talks about the art of the audition.
Right.
Going into an audition, you have to be like we were talking about before. You have to be well versed and
Right.
you have to know what you're going into.
Right.
And I've also heard Rudy Sarzo mention this. You're there to serve. If they're hiring you as a bass player, guitar player, you're there to serve the band.
Yes.
You can bring in your own little thing here and there,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, you're serving the band.
Exactly.
Unless they ask you, hey, we want your input in
Right.
this. Other than that, you're just
I'd say that's the mark of a professional,
Mhm.
is knowing,
Right. And I kind of parallel a lot. Every time I think of you, I think of Rudy Sarzo a lot.
Right,
I mean, every
right.
time I think of Rudy a lot, I think of
Right,
you.
right,
'Cause you guys are the same age, and you pretty much have the same background.
Right,
He
right.
comes from. He was born in Cuba, and
Right.
he did a lot of he did all the circuits. Playing jazz clubs.
Right, right.
Woodshedding, just about
Right,
anything.
Right.
To getting to the point where he was playing with people like Ozzy,
Right,
and
right,
Quiet
right.
Riot, and
Right.
Whitesnake, all
Right.
these
Big
huge
time.
bands.
Yeah.
And to this day, he always says, you have to. I was always there to serve the band. What was
Right.
best for the band? How can I make the band better?
Exactly.
Instead of how can the band make me better?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's
It's
just
not about you. The ego
Right,
thing.
right.
It's not.
It's not about you.
It's a professional way of looking at it.
Mhm,
So
and that's what, in my opinion, that's what makes a professional musician.
I think so.
Mhm.
I think so.
So
So-
it's been we've gone almost 2 hours here, 2.5 hours here. It's
Cool.
been a wonderful conversation.
Same here.
Harley.
Same here,
It's,
man. I have enjoyed it, and I hope I've imparted some knowledge with.
Oh, way more than I could have expected. I mean, I've always been curious about your career and how you've gotten to where you're at now.
Right.
And do you have any current projects that you're working on, or that you will be working on,
Actually,
where can people catch you? Like, do you play around the Houston area?
right now, I'm working with a band called Jerry Diaz and Hannah's Reef, and we're doing kind of like the Jimmy Buffett stuff. It's kind of beach music.
Right.
It's kind of out of what I normally do, but I'm doing this because it's a little bit of an extra income, and I'm there to support the band. Again, I'm not really there to do my thing, but they let me stretch out here and there. They want me to play some of the leads when it comes up, so they hired me as a lead player, and they have a pan player, so it's a lot of Caribbean music, that kind of stuff, beach music.
Right.
So I'm doing that, but right now we're kind of just playing Florida, New Orleans, Bourbon Street, that kind of stuff. So it's not easy to catch us. Sometimes you can catch us at T-Bone Tom's in Kemah. So every now and then, be looking out for Jerry Diaz and Hannah's Reef at T-Bone Tom's. So
Amazing.
right now,
Amazing.
and I'm sure we'll be touching base again, and I'll
Oh,
probably be doing
absolutely.
other projects that you guys
Absolutely.
can come and hear us. So
Do you have any favorites, whether that be current or all-time favorite bands or guitarists, musicians?
right now, the guy I listen to the most is guys like Larry Carlton and Lee Ritenour, the session guys. They're personal CDs. They do acoustic and electric stuff, and their session work. So that's kind of what I'm into right now, is studying how they approach sessions and personal CDs and stuff like that they of their own. So that's what I'm into now.
Amazing. I should probably start looking a lot into that stuff. If I'm still, I mean, I branch off to other areas
Sure,
here and there,
sure.
but I still have my favorites in the hard rock and
Of course.
heavy metal genre. I mean,
There's
I'm
so
always
much.
gonna love that.
Of course.
Bands like Kiss, obviously, Sabbath,
Yeah.
AC/DC, and I try to go catch them while they're still around. Because
Yeah, I would.
you never know
While they're around, you know.
how much left they have in the tank.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like the Stones or the Who, I'm amazed they're still out there.
Can
doing
you
it.
imagine? Can you imagine? I mean, they're ancient, but they're still doing it. They're
And
still doing it.
You hear the stories all the time about Keith Richards. And
Right?
It's like, man, that guy's still alive.
He's still alive. He's like so many incarnations. I mean, the guy should have died many times already, but you see him now, he's happy. He's clean. He's all that. So
He's seen it all.
He's seen it all many times over, and he's in one of the most incredible bands in the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Stones.
The Stones.
It's amazing, and I'm really looking forward to see what the next decades have to offer as far as music goes.
I know.
Whether that be in that genre or just whatever's popular.
Whatever's gonna new that's gonna come up, I'm interested in that too. So I'm gonna keep my ears glued to, and also how the whole genre of recording and everything
Technology.
now with personal recording technology, how all that's changing, and I'm interested in that too. So
I hear albums being released now where the musicians themselves, they just record their parts and they put it together, and that's how they release it.
Exactly.
They don't even put on a live show or anything, or
exactly,
or get together and.
Exactly, and you can have your own. You can record it at home, your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Send it off to a company to have all the artwork done and so many CDs printed, and you could just have them arrive at your house already. 5,000 CDs with all the artwork and everything done, and you could do it all out of your own house.
Right.
And release it the way you want to.
Right.
It's amazing.
Pretty much produce your own album.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
I like that. I like that idea.
I've always loved the whole idea of people who do their own albums and
Right.
just play all the instruments. I hear Yngwie Malmsteen has done it all the time.
Right.
He plays all the guitars.
Right.
All the bass guitars.
The bass stuff.
And just adds a drum machine. And
Yeah, exactly.
off to the races.
It can be done. It can be done. So.
And I've even read, before we close out, an instance where Paul Stanley from Kiss, he was doing a Kiss album called Animalize back in 84, I believe.
Right.
And I'm reading through the credits because I'm always interested in as to who produced it and engineered and stuff like that. I'm reading through the credits and it says, like, certain songs says, all guitars by Paul Stanley, bass guitar by Paul Stanley on this and that, background vocals by. I'm like, damn, this guy, he did most of the songs on here. It's pretty much a solo album.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I could just imagine where he was at the time,
Right.
and doing all these things, and it all had to do with what Gene Simmons was doing at the time with his movie career. And
I see. Yeah.
so he wasn't that vested in the band, but
Right.
he got to the point where it's like, man, someone's got to
Right.
take charge. And,
Right.
And look where he's at now.
I know it. I know it.
63 and, still doing it.
Exactly. So.
And he was on the Joe Rogan Experience the Other Day podcast.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan goes, man, if I can end up looking like you by the time I'm 63, man, I'd be happy. He just looks in shape and this and that. I'm like, because you see rock stars all the time. It's like, man, they're like Malcolm Young from AC/DC.
Right.
He's like 63 with dementia already. It's like,
Oh, I
dude,
know.
what happened?
I know.
It's like, man.
No, you can't. The older you get, the more in shape you need to keep looking at staying in shape and what you eat and working out a little. Working out and doing the right things.
And dementia is like you only hear that in people that are like 70s or 80s,
know.
but early 60s, it's like, dude, like
That's young.
it's like you're to the point where he doesn't recognize anybody anymore.
Right.
So, and
That's sad.
he was forced to retire from the band, and that's pretty. That's
Oh.
unfortunate because he was the driving force of AC/DC.
Right.
Writing all those riffs. And
Right.
stuff like
Right.
that. But it's just a shame what the
That's
reality
sad.
of what
Yeah.
drugs and alcohol can do.
Exactly. They will take their toll.
So maybe not when you're 19, but
No, but when you're 60-something,
60-something,
if you're fortunate to live that long,
that liver can only take so much.
Exactly.
But Heli, it's been a lot of fun, and we definitely
Thank you,
had the
Alex. I
chance
have
to-
enjoyed the heck out of it. So
had the chance to do this now before we both start getting busy again.
Exactly.
Me
Exactly.
with graduating and getting a job, and
exactly.
you just hitting the road again.
Exactly. So
But it's been a lot of fun, and we'll have to get together again.
thank you.
sometime
Let's do it again, okay?
Do it
Alex?
again and see what we're up to at that point.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thanks to you out there for listening. You guys have the websites, datelinedowntown.com/podcast, the YouTube, the